they lifted it off.
Oh, they left it off. So it's like,
Year 18. Thank you for your attendance. Just a couple of things of note on your workshop programs towards the end. If we're making good time, we're going to slip in future workshops and possibly touch on a little bit about our own CDC workshop survey to go out. Because the Targo wide one finishes on Sunday. So, preliminaries. Opening statement, is this you?
That's you.
Me? Do we have any apologies? No. No apologies? Nothing else to tick off there? It's a workshop, it's not a meeting.
No, I mean, in terms of the agenda, in terms of the program and things, we just we talk about, we're just picking up items as we go with the long-term plan. The idea of the rating review, which was thrown at Sharon at relatively short notice, but we assured her that it didn't require a lot of actual detailed work. The idea was from today to try to get a direction on what specific rating reviews we would do. Yes, there's this discussion around, we'll talk about this or this or this, but let's clarify that and be very clear, because we took out of here, you'll see it in the agenda, there's a lot of pages on process for rating reviews. So you want to make sure you're only doing those that are necessary, that will make a difference. And so what we wanted to try to do is use the time from the workshop side of things to be just clear on which ones we're going to go away with to start those processes. It's not to decide the particular within the reviews what the solutions are, and that, but it is to so that we know what the boundaries of what we're actually going to be looking at. So, helps to introduce what you were putting together at short notice, Sharon.
Thank you, Steve. It certainly does. Okay, so before we start, the really important point is that a rating review reallocates who pays, like it's about stacking your deck chairs. It's not about how much you collect, it's about how you allocate that. Okay, and so just a bit of background information, apart from what's in the paper already, that rates are a form of tax, and there's we've got a lot of standards to comply with to set them, like Mike Hawken was talking about this morning about rating reviews and stuff. Currently, our rates we're about to set now that you guys adopted in the annual plan are in legal review already, because we go through that process every year because it's very technical. And yet again, a rating review focuses on who pays and how the costs are allocated, not how much we collect. We do have quite a lot of discretion amongst the Act on types of things we can do, but we have to also follow these principles of acting reasonably within the law and being fair. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so what we want to try and do today is define the scope of any review you want us to look at, and for you guys to provide us some direction on things you would like us to model and what are the priorities, and just an indicative way forward for us to go and look at anything you would wish us to look at. Okay, so if you do a full rating review, it has to ensure that your rates align with your funding needs and community outcomes. It's linked to the living and working strategy and government sector expectations and direction. It's aimed at maintaining affordability and improving transparency and fairness and supporting our long-term financial sustainability. So it's about if we think there's a really big problem, then we're obviously trying to improve something, is where this is sort of heading. And we still need to achieve a balanced and equitable funding model post-water. So we need to keep that in mind as well, and other government things coming. Okay, we need to consider, as I just alluded to, government reforms, the impacts and the timing of those things ahead of us that are popping up. And we need to make sure that we keep our revenue and financing policy, a funding impact statement, and rates resolution is consistent. That is what's currently being legally reviewed. And we need to make sure that There's clear rationale for every decision you make to change the funding or fund anything. And try not to be too complicated in decisions, because we have quite a complicated rating model anyway. It's quite complicated. Okay, so,
Yeah.
pardon?
Make it simple. Decide.
Okay, so some things we want you to think about is like, what are we trying to fix? What are we trying to fix? You know, the direction. What's the things that are broken that we need to fix? And do we need a full review, or do we just are there just some targeted things we would like to look at? And then as we're going through that, it's like, are our current rating methods still aligned with who benefits, what drives the costs, and who's best placed to pay? And in addition to that, like of the mechanisms we've got general rates, targeted rates, fixed charges. Is that balance correct? Okay, and then the question, is this the right time to be doing this? So with all the stuff heading for us, like with Southern Waters leaving, the upcoming LTP is going to be massively different. With Three Waters moving off the balance sheet and the things we're going to have to do, and we've got other legislation heading our way as well. But with water alone, 51% of our rate funding disappears, along with a lot of costs also, of course. And given the uncertainty of facing local government at this time, other reforms, amalgamation, rates capping, all these things, we just want you to keep that in mind when considering the scope or impact of any review that you'd like us to perform. So yeah, in the last statement, it might not make sense right now to initiate this with 3 years left to implement, and then we're amalgamated, for example.
Oh, but what you're meaning by that, when you say this, you weren't talking about the total review side of things.
Oh, a massive review.
When you're looking at a particular review, you might give consideration to, is it the right time for that particular review?
Yeah.
Well, we weren't suggesting deferring otherwise we defer.
It's not saying don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
It's just saying each time think, is this the right time to be doing this? Yeah, sorry. Okay, so we've pulled some issues that you've raised today of things that you wanted us to look at as we've gone through previous workshops and annual plan decisions and stuff like that, and come up with this list, which is by no means exhaustive because we've got anything else at the bottom. So we had on the district-wide public convenience funding, swimming pools, museums, roading, and roading is two phases, footpaths, I've put that under roading as well, and any consideration you would like to put towards residual costs after 4 Waters have transitioned. And then, of course, there's the opportunity to bring up anything else you might want to look at.
When do you want to take the notes for the anything else?
At the end, please. Thank you.
Because the way we've constructed it, isn't it, is that we at least have discussions
On each point.
on each of the points raised, and then we need to have that ability to, if someone's suggesting something, to have a discussion about that as well.
Okay. So first up, public convenience funding. So
You started with the easy one first?
yes, it did. So what I've tried to do on each slide is explain what we do now, and if there was changes made, when they were made and why they were made, things like that. So this one, currently our public toilets are funded 50% from UAGC and 50% district-wide based on capital value. Previous to that, it was 100% UAGC. And then we changed it because we were having, struggling to stay below the 30% cap required by Section 21 of that. And that was back in, I can't remember actually, 2021. Sorry, the 21-31 LTP. And that was also the same time prior to that, community services was not a fixed charge per community. It was charged on land value properties. So by putting that as a fixed charge, it affected our 30% cap, so we had to look at something else. So, and just looking at this for the 2027-37, sorry, my bad typing, annual plan, 28 annual plan, the total cost of toilets was 1,021,000, and a 30% cap is sitting at 23.44. So if we did move back to 100% UAGC funding, that means our cap would move to 24.47. So that's well under the 30% cap. So the direction we're seeking from you is, do we leave it the way it is? Do we move it back to 100% UAGC funding or something else?
Through you, Chairman, is that calculation based on the annual plan?
Yes,
Not
sorry.
necessarily what the LTP mix will be when we lose our 50% of our water.
Correct, but the 30% cap in the LTP is going to be messy.
It's going to what, sorry?
Be messy, very
Something
messy.
well over 30. Of
And
It will
not
be.
apply for 5 years.
And not apply for 5 years, but it'll be about 40%, 45%.
course it will be. Yes.
Yep, so we are definitely allowed to go to 40%.
There is no cap for 5 years,
Yeah,
but we've
for
got
5
to be actively working towards it.
But in the interim, in that time, this will be another council will be setting these toilet rates.
Potentially.
So we've got plenty of leeway there. This is, you said this is a hard one, it's a real easy one. We've got heaps of room under the UAGC.
Yeah.
So we said this
No, we
was
said it was
easy.
easy.
We
We weren't being smart.
weren't being sarcastic.
I thought it was in jest. I thought it was in jest because this has been a bone of contention. And the only reason why you've done it in the past, why you shifted it, was
That's right.
to
Correct.
under that 30% cap. So yeah, easy.
Yeah. Your Worship, I agree. We did have someone here submitting on it about the fairness of it, and he was paying $900 towards toilets, and the average urban person was 30 odd, and if we all paid 60, it would be fair. So I think it's, as Simon says, it's easy.
From a council direction perspective, would there be any other counter views from the elected members to that approach?
So what is it? Million?
About $100 a property if there's around 10,000.
Yeah, 11,000.
The submitter got it,
12,000.
didn't quite get it quite right because the UAGC component is one that everybody pays. So
Yeah.
they were paying more than 30.
Still, it's better than 900, isn't it?
And we actually didn't call it a toilet rate either. We called it district-wide services because we thought other things might have had to be added into it to keep it on the cap.
Do you still think that?
No,
Oh,
not
not at
5
this
years
stage.
ago, get out of jail free.
Caps out.
Is that like, so we're calling it toilets, but is that including our grey-water stations, you know, with the dump stations for the caravans and all
Yeah,
that?
public dump stations are considered part of it.
They are.
So are we clear?
So we-
We've got reasonable agreement that the
Going with
direction
that.
would be to go 100% UAG funded?
Okay.
We need to have a vote on that, so no one turns around later on and says, oh, no, I wasn't for that.
We will. We tend to, sometimes we have a general view of the, when we say direction, it's good to know that the majority agree with something, or it was unanimous at the time to agree something. We will certainly come back to you at a later date if there was some rigorous debate about it and mention that when it was workshopped, there was this consensus on it at the time. We'll certainly remind you of it, but we don't necessarily need that, except where, you know, like it's a bit 50-50 in one way or another. We need to just do work. We're going to do something this way or not. It's good to at least get that sort of review so we know that we'll get it. So
So, yeah, all those in favour? Aye. Yep.
okay.
Simon's smiling like a cheese
Ex-councillor John Cochran would be so pleased.
All he needs now is that whack of the cunt, right?
Right, swimming pools, here we go.
Oh, thank you. So on to number
Oh,
two,
righto.
another easy one, right?
Yep.
So swimming pool funding. Okay, so this table, hopefully it's straightforward. This shows how we are currently funding the pools in our district. And it also shows who owns the pools. There's 2 council-owned pools there only. And pretty much all pools are funded by the UAGC that are community-owned, except Lawrence Tuapeka, their payment is still going through their swimming pool cost centre, so it's going 50-50. And Kaitangata, they have a grant paid to them, but this is going to change anyway, I believe, with an agreement, and the $5,000 is power that we pay on their behalf through their community, through their swimming pool cost centre. And the council-owned swimming pools are funded 50-50 Community Services Council. And the question here is, what is the method of funding you'd like to see?
Or funding options.
Yeah, options, yeah. What funding options would you like to see?
Yeah.
If it was to change.
If it was to change?
Yeah. I'm sure Councillor Catlin would. Has anyone got anything they want to say before Councillor Catlin?
Just one of the complications with this community services rate is again those community services areas of interest.
Yes.
And that's, yeah, that's rather problematic. Yeah, that's before we altered that, perhaps that is one area that perhaps should be altered before we actually had some of this discussion or discussed.
So do you want to say that again, Simon?
Well, the community areas of interest, community services rate, like the, I'm specifically talking about the lower Clutha, includes all Kaitankata, the Clutha Valley. Like our farm, I've got, we're right at the end, I've got one rate in the Tuapika area, and then the other in the lower Clutha. I'm a heck of a long way from Clutha to be paying for this swimming pool.
We get the best of both worlds.
Two points.
But that would be like the thing in the way we're scheduling this. You're right, Councillor, is that if that was under the anything else we consider, and you say, hey, we need to review whether we actually have community services rate, or we want to review the boundaries of the community services rate. That's two different things. It's just a boundary, then review. That doesn't really impact on this at the moment. It would majorly impact if you were going to suggest, for example, we weren't going to have a community services rate. You're not suggesting that, though, are you?
No.
Okay, so we could afford to, as long as the council understands that we still feel that there's a need for a community services rate to charge something to a local area of interest, then that's all right. We can park that. That doesn't have a bearing on this. And we can put the boundaries of the community services rating areas as an anything else discussion.
Yeah, but it's a pretty deep one, because it's not just the pools. You look at the cost of the payment, the radius of it. There's a lot of other small towns get a lot of benefit from some of those other things, but they're not charged that community services rate.
Yeah. Correct, but because we're not worried about the quantum of the revenue, the amount. Right? That's not what we're doing. We're talking about the principle of the mechanisms, just highlighting that we need to review what's bounded by that rate. That's perfectly valid, but that doesn't impact on this particular thing, because we're not trying to say which community area would something be charged to. That's not what we're looking at this one. We're just saying, is a community area of interest a valid funding mechanism for a swimming pool, for example, right? So that's the discussion you're having, not which one does it belong to.
The answer is maybe not. It does seem the whole thing is quite, it's a minefield.
Yeah, which is why I'm trying to clarify for you the bits that you're raising, and that's what I'm trying to say. As long as we're not worried about, it's not something, we're not going to have a community services rate. That's a big deal. If we're not going down that pathway, then we can do these things, and we can deal with boundaries and borders as another matter too.
Yeah, like so I'm not comfortable with it, then I haven't got a better idea either. So.
Well, again, but these points are never about the quantum.
Yeah.
It's always how you're going to allocate the costs, right?
Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. So, is this the only way we've ever funded pools in this district?
No. Nope.
So, what other models have there been? For example, have we had like halls where there's been community of interest?
The way we used to fund community facilities is we didn't go wider than the townships. We had, each township had its own community facilities rate, and the rest of the rural area was where the rest of it was funded. And part of the debate then was, does that actually fairly reflect that people in the rural area are just outside the boundary are using some of those facilities? So it's a matter of I think where we got to was this was a fairer way to do it than where we were before. Whether this is perfect is a completely different debate. The other question I would raise, if you're going to change the boundaries, is that something we want to tackle, given they all might be thrown out in a couple of years, in a few years' time?
Yeah, but that might be the debate for the, I'm just saying anything else. And I'll just pick up Jules's point though, is that I don't think it was necessarily a different, I know you technically would be a different funding mechanism when you ask the question, but that township one was replaced by the whole community areas where we did this massive consultation change around being fairer and transparent to it. So again, I would sort of see the question being wrapped up, if we were going to change that back to townships, for example, really wrapped up around the boundaries question of communities of interest. I think we could definitely, again, not get confused on the matter. We can apply that question as to whether it's a pure urban only change of boundary or whatever to that anything else discussion. I still think there's the urban boundary or current community benefit area. That's just a principle of a localised allocation of funding versus a UAGC, which is across the district. That's the principle you should get in mind.
In addition to that, it was calculated differently.
It was on land value.
It was on land value, not a fixed
The move
charge.
to fixed charges was seen to be fair.
Yeah.
So a big land value commercial property in the middle of our Clutha wasn't paying 5 times more than a household.
Wasn't or was?
Wasn't.
What
It
was,
was before, but it
was.
wasn't after this was introduced as fixed charges.
So, excuse me, but so what would the argument be around 50% UAGC, for example, and 50% community of interest, which could easily be defined by our wards within reason?
That's the way it is now.
Yeah. Well, it's
No, but it's not a fixed amount.
But it's 50-50. 50% on the UAGC, 50% on the community of interest. The debate is the community of interest area.
yeah.
And the wards definitely no better than.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
But that's a different discussion, as Steve's pointed out.
So I've got a proposal.
Yes.
So if I wanted to say something quite fair, would be to use a fixed UAGC charge, and it was 50-50 to the community of interest.
So
As a model,
Yeah.
So my UAGC now, inside my UAGC, we'll just round it up, right? Let's just say Catlins Woods paying, we're all paying it in our UAGC, $100 towards pool.
Yep.
So is the model 50% goes to the pool's community of interest, right? So the Catlins Woods would go to the OAC swimming bars, 50% of the total charged, and then 50% district-wide.
But that's the problem with that is it's not how you it's not how the rating, how that rating works in the sense of
No.
you've got to achieve a revenue amount.
Because you have the same revenue.
No, but you've got to look at it from that perspective then. What is the revenue aspect, right? Like, here is the cost of the activity, swimming pools, community swimming pools, whatever. Or whatever decision you take that you're going to put money into, X amount of dollars. Even if you model it the way you're suggesting, whatever figure you come up with.
So what do the communities have to do?
Your community's going to be screaming.
No, you know, at the moment, you're just looking at it in terms of how we're currently paying, here's the amount of dollars, and I want to split that up a different way, right? We say it's got to be a different way. You've got to say, whatever an activity costs, that is the rationale for being able to run it, right? So X amount of dollars. And then, okay, so you're going to put some to community of interest and some to UAGC. Okay, well that's a funding mechanism. That's fine as a funding mechanism. What the quantum is a different question. But that's no different to what there is here. You're funding sometimes now 50-50. You could change the percentage, but that's it. So nobody's debating that. Just the way you were describing it and what we're calculating it, that's no different from what we've already got in terms of allocating it two different ways.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Okay, so
So that's pretty, to me, it's quite fair, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's probably similar. I think we're talking the same.
So you've got the same budget, right? Well, I'm not messing with your budget.
No, so there's a different thing, like, you have to determine what is the cost, what is how much you're going to be collecting in revenue, what do you need for to that particular activity. Like, if you just agreed that you want to fund every single community swimming pool $100,000, right?
Yeah.
And the model is 50-50. Well, that's calculated, right? We're just going to give them $100,000. It's not based on anything. It's just 100,000, and we will do 50-50. Okay, that's achievable. You're going to give them that money and let them do it. It's a grant. No problem, right? Obviously, there's a rating impact as a consequence of that, but that's what you do. That's not an issue. It's what you're trying to do. Is
What I'm saying is that the people, the community of interest that are paying the UAGC are getting 50% of the money generated within their community of interest to their pool, back to that activity. So it's just simple. And the other 50, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't have an issue with the proposal that community pools are funded for a percentage, whatever you choose, 50-50, community area of interest, whatever area it's going to be.
40-60.
And that's a valid direction you can give us.
Yeah, Sharon's dying to say something.
And I just want to clarify what Dane's saying though. Are you saying that if we had to rate 749,000 from the community of interest, that's fine, they pay that, the community of interest pays that? And that of the 783 that comes from the UAGC, are you saying that the money that comes from the UAGC goes back to that community that pays it?
50%.
Because
50% of it.
50% of it.
Because
So if you want to call it, no, what I'm saying is, you want to call a swimming pool rate district. It's the same figure throughout the whole district. But 50% of it goes back to you, like, class them all as community pools, right? So if there's 1,000 UAGCs, the figure is $100, right? It would be 50,000, you know what I mean? And there was, you know, fair, like just straight, absolute.
But a lot
If
of
there's
those,
673 UAGCs out of the Lawrence Tour Picker community of interest, and that's their class as their pool.
Yeah, but-
UAGCs don't work like that.
so are you talking community pools only?
No, because then you'd obviously have there'd be a pot left, which would be able to subsidise your council-owned pool.
Because,
No.
yeah.
I'm a wee bit uncomfortable with some of that in theory, because there's one pool not even up there, a well-run community pool, and that's Tapanui. So they're not even actually here.
was that on West Otago?
Yeah,
Oh, does it? Yeah, okay, sorry.
I get it.
I didn't hear it, yeah.
enough.
But in proportion, but some of the others, they probably don't need that level of funding. But they've always run in the community.
Just to be clear, through you, Mr. Chairman, West Otago gets a big chunk of money too from the commonage money, so they get another
me.
15 grand.
Oh, just to
that's
make
not-
you aware,
Yeah,
But what,
and they're freaking out because
Yeah.
it's got a $7,000.
we appreciate that, but that's actually not really relevant to the discussion here.
Well, yeah, but if we're going to divvy out a whole heap of funds, like there's two pools down the bottom that function pretty well on a shoestring from the council, why? Well, I'd probably take it, but you.
No, what I'm saying is, so it's the person that's paying for it, seeing the benefit of coming back.
So in the same sentence then, councillor McTamaney, they run on a shoestring, so why are they paying
For someone else.
for someone else's pool?
No, no,
That could be saving that
So
money.
that was where I was
They could be
referring back
saving
to,
that
that was
money,
back
so.
when I was referring to that local communities of interest.
Yeah.
So a whole heap of people in Closer Valley are funding their own pool.
As well as subsidising another pool.
Subsidising the back pool.
Well, in your case, you're subsidising 3 pools, we get that.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
time.
But we're not actually resolving the issue here. So
Yeah.
how do we want to treat it? Is
But,
what
but,
Sharon
but,
said.
but it's important as to how you spend it. It's also relevant to how you rate.
Well, we're not the ones really spending it, because those community-owned pools are raising their own money also and spending it on the pool.
Correct.
They are
And
running it.
Well,
They
and
are
paying-
running their pool.
And paying to enter it.
Yeah, and pay to use those
Well,
services.
we will be forced into having to lift the whole rating for pools up.
No,
We're not going
No,
to Baltotha and Milton.
Correct, you're making a community pool.
That's a different, that's a different debate.
Well, we're going to need more money.
That's,
So-
I'm not disagreeing.
Not necessarily.
You've got three different ways. You've got, well, depending on the debate, you're saying, community pools or pools should be 100% funded around the district, right, fixed charge. Or you could have community pools funded 50-50, community area of interest, UAGC, or you could say, I want the pools to be funded wholly through community services rate by the local area, right? We know what impacts are going to be for some of those big current community public pools, because you can imagine what would happen associated with that, right? Now, we're not talking quantums, we're just saying these are the various methods that we have to do it. You've got a different issue around what you put in, the difference between Clutha Valley being paid 4,000 and Clinton being paid 4 and somebody being paid 1. That's a different debate that you will have around fairness of funding and how much you should be contributing and what's the allocate, how are you going to do that? That's a different question. But the issue is those Clutha Valleys, those Clintons, currently district-wide UAGC, right? Do you want to change that? It's those plus the others and the consequences of changing.
Yes.
There isn't much difference. There's less impact on people if you go fully district-wide. There is more impact on ones that have the expensive pools and other bits and pieces if you go 50-50. And there is massive change to people if you go wholly community services rate, right? You can imagine that, which is why public pools have been 50, right? But what we're wanting to know, we can model the different ones, right? At the end of the day, the direction might be, I want you to model the impacts of those three methods, right? And that can be modelled. And then we go through that process. The rating review, in that instance, for example, because of the significance, the rating review process would be, would you go through the whole hog, because you'd want to be justifying that you are wholly comfortable that only the Balclutha Township or that area pays for the Balclutha, right? But there's a process for that, and we don't have to debate the process now.
Yeah, that's right. We're not debating. The question is, what is the method of funding you would like to see for public council pools? We're not worried about all the other associated issues at this point. Councillor Cotton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So with the modelling, at the moment you've got 50-50. Is it worth looking at something like 40-60 or something like that? Is that something?
Again, that's
another debate.
That is something that we've just gone to
Anything else?
50-50. But absolutely, when you go into those things in real detail and if you want to get into that sort of stuff, you're really looking at why, what justifies 60% public good versus 40% area interest good. And so you're doing that sort of homework and someone's doing some figures for you on that, justifications. But that's what you need to do if you're wanting to switch it from there. 50-50.
Well, a variation to that argument for funding, different options to look at would be that instead of the community of interest getting 50%, 100% of the UAGC, that you say, what does it look like if the communities get 20% of the UAGC pool proportion, or 25 to 30, and then endeavour area, because then it might look a wee bit more reasonable.
Sure. I don't think when you talk about significance of cost, let's be realistic. It's probably not significant, whatever it is, how you're distributing and allocating community pool funding. In the scheme of things, when you look at what we're paying, and even if you increase that, it's not significant necessarily. We all know what the significance ones is. It's the cost of the Milton pool and the cost of the Balclutha pool. That is the significant impact if you have different.
They're run
funding.
differently as well.
That's right.
So
But that-
modelling, yeah, modelling scenarios.
Yeah.
Well, I firmly believe that communities of interest, like, so Koitanga is doing a big refurb now, putting in 2 huge heat pumps. They're about to face some $4,000 a month power bills might come out. They're going to need more than that. It's only a month and a half's worth of power to heat their pool. So it's got to change. We've got to change the model. So, yeah, bring a couple of models, but yeah, 50% of what you pay towards the activity comes back to the community of interest. That's the model I'd like to see.
I'd like to see modelling too.
But currently, we're not so much about the modelling. Where's the money going to come from? So are you happy with the community services rate or
No, so what we'll
No, we're saying
take, what we'll take
or
is
community of interest,
that
or what do you want to call it?
we'll want to do a rating review that looks at, the option of just UAGC across the
Yeah.
board, that looks at a percentage, scenario building around the 50% of
Yeah.
the two,
Yeah.
and a scenario of just the community services rate. Okay, that can be done as part of our modelling. That's the sort of thing we wanted to make sure we got, right? Again, the quantum issue discussion's a different issue, but we can go and do that modelling side of it. So
That comes out later.
yeah.
Because you've got a figure up there, like you've got sitting Belclutha. What do you got, pools there? Total. So you've got a total sitting up there, funding of 7 million. Oh, that's on the funding side. No loans involved in that. Well, there is loans involved in that. but
Yep.
it's 783.
That is the total that we rate.
No, but you take 1.6 million.
Yeah, 700.
There's two numbers.
2 columns.
Set community of interest in UAGC.
Yeah, it's 50-50. So that's what it is.
It just, I think it would be unfair to go all UAGC. From the point of, if I look over West Otago, in the area, a lot of those people will be using the walk And yet, so it'd be unfair to have them paying a full UAGC rate, particularly when they're not going to use, most likely not use our council.
They're paying $100 towards a pool at UAGC now, so
If it one, they can pay 200.
they won't have to.
The critter.
They won't have to.
I think you're going to need it. I think
Yeah,
you're still going to need that.
Well, I mean, it'll be modelled if it's a UAGC.
Yeah.
And everybody pays for it.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. The West Otago users, probably a lot of them, they're paying for a lot of service that they won't use.
But that's not our problem. We're providing the service. It's up to the individual whether they use it or not.
Do the modelling, yeah.
You could
Yeah.
have the same argument from Milton. They go to Moscow, so.
Yeah, but at the moment, we charge them the community services, right? That's why I'm saying.
They're already
I mean, it'd be nice if we could cut down on what we have to do, but there's probably not much difference in work to do the UAGC modelling in addition to the other modelling.
But the majority of like Simon, like the Chirpeka one there, that's paying back a loan that the community agreed to.
Yeah.
To get a loan, so that will disappear.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at, say, West Otago, we don't make them pay a full rate for payment. Is what some of the other areas of interest are. For the same reason, they probably don't use it to the same extent.
So
if you
you
go
said
to
to the cross recreation
But
centre.
if you go to an all UAGC,
yeah.
then they all have to contribute the same.
Yeah, I hear you.
I hear what you're saying. But Sharon, have you got enough direction on that one?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think so.
Yeah,
I can bring some stuff back.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
It
next.
doesn't mean to say that's the decision, councillor. Right?
Yeah.
Just
No,
doing
just get to
modelling.
see.
But yeah,
And another note on that is that there's 410,000 in that 1.6 of internal services that is coming out of pools. That needs to be looked at as well.
Yeah.
Because that's going to get washed out because we're losing 51% of our income, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why we said don't sweat the quantums, because we know that there's an overhead model review needed. We're going to do that. And it's entirely related by the structural changes necessary to deal with three waters moving out, and all that side of things. So yes, the underlying costs after that still have to be determined, and we need a new overhead. So, yes, later down.
Yeah, down the line.
Okay, so next up, we've got museums. So this is just saying that currently museums are UAGC funded and that we pay a legislated amount to Otago Museum. And in addition to that, we pay an annual grant to Clutha Combined Museums, who splits it up between 6 museums. But in addition to that, each annual plan or long-term plan, if museums come to you, funding decisions are decided then. And how you fund those is also decided then, so they may not be UAGC. So the direction here is, do you want museums to remain funded from UAGC, or would you like to relook at how we fund those? Not how much, though, how we fund them.
Well, my thoughts are that museums remain funded solely only from the UAGC.
There's no other way they can be.
Well, you could do
Well, you
community
can do
services here.
Community area. Yeah.
But it's, it's a hard one. You say community of benefit, but the whole district, the whole region benefits.
Yeah, but we're between themselves, there's 6 combined body museum. We've given them an increase this year in annual funding. And then they sort it out. It's simple. To me, that's the only mechanism they've got. But to me, that's how that works.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we're doing a review on how much we're funding and how it's to be done in that sense. But we need to do that step backwards and also just say, is this a rating review issue, or is it just a funding question issue? We just want to make sure we cross it off or we put it in for a review. So that's all we know. And if there's no desire to change it from the existing funding, then we eliminate it from the rating review. These.
Just historically through you, Mr. Chair, that previously there wasn't a combined district museums. They used to individually ask us for stuff. This isn't about rating, this is about the process. But it seems to have changed, and now they ask us about individual things as well as the combined grant. So just for the mechanics moving forward, it'd be good to have it one way or the other. But that's a separate question to the rating side.
Yeah, so same answer.
I think it's almost run its course, the district.
So, I mean, is there any desire
To change.
to change the current method of funding?
There's one thing I really would like to change.
You can.
Is it a rating review?
Councillor Smith, what are you thinking? I see you're thinking
I
this.
was waiting for Roger's comment, but no, it's the UAGC, isn't it?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's getting too complex.
What do you reckon, Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, I'll just stick with the UAGC.
We know Councillor Brown will go there. You think of that too?
I stated that before, actually.
Okay, that's what I just seeing if you remember. Checking to see if you remember. Councillor Frost, you got anything? Councillor Frost?
No, UAGC seems to be all right.
There you go, there's your direction.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have roading. Cool, thank you. And this is just, Jules is going to help me out with this one. But this is just saying how we split. And there was quite a lot in the actual agenda paper. We put quite a bit of background about roading in there because it is complicated. So this is just an overview of that, I guess, that we have local benefit 63%, district-wide 33%. So that's 67.33, sorry.
It's not public convenience.
Oh, okay, I guess I was tired. Where's that? Sorry.
It's just district-wide funding.
I can't even see what I said.
District-wide public convenience.
Oh, I did so. My bad. Sorry.
I was like, we're talking about the roads by the toilets.
No, sorry. Okay. By funding. Okay.
So, and currently the local one is a land value charge plus a fixed charge, Sharon, is that correct?
Yes.
And the district-wide one is a capital value rate charge across the whole district.
Yes. Yes.
And as I said there, we introduced a fixed charge. and they're slightly different, which means they don't become part of the
30% cap, and that was around different levels of seal extensions that were done in rural and urban areas. And so we did revisit this. We did a lot of work on this for 2131 LTP, which I've missed the P as well. I was having a very bad day. And it came, all the calculations we did around the roading types that are listed, like the arterial collector, whoever the other one is, and it came back very, very similar to the 67-33 split. 63-37, goodness. Split. So no changes were made at that point. And
we also looked at Southland District Council have a model where they have differentials based on land use. It required a lot of 2 LTP. My understanding is it took 2-3 year lots of the LTP process to get that in and to have the information to actually justify those differentials. The other thing that we also have in our district is our district plan currently, it's going to change once we have a region-wide spatial plan, but we currently have the opportunity to charge forestry or hand it over to forestry during the logging process, so they pay for those costs at the time they log. There's an 18-month notification for access to local roads, and that provides us that opportunity to have a discussion. So what that does is, if there is costs, they tend to be at the time they're actually logging rather than through the whole 30-year life of the forest. That may not be there in the future, but this is likely to get the data for our community and to say, well, what are the forestry costs versus all those other costs? There's likely to be a long process based on what Southland went through. So I'm just flagging, given the discussion we had at the start and what's on the horizon, this may be too big an elephant to start chewing on in this LTP.
Leave it as is.
Councillor Curran. So, out of that local,
Create a headache on the roading side of things, so
what was that statement you took?
I think long term, the forestry thing's gonna create headaches for us on the roading side of things, so I suppose if you can hand roads over and they look after them, that's fine, but if you want to have a process in place 10 or 15 years' time to make sure that the masses of forestry we now have in this area are going to contribute to the maintenance of these roads, you've got to start the process now. You can't wait another 3 years or whatever.
I suppose the only uncertainty we have at the moment is what entity will be creating those rates going forward. So it might be an amalgam of wherever we end up. So that I suppose that's what we were thinking, is that there may be a different mechanism of doing that. If we've got a regional spatial plan that covers forestry in a certain way, it could be considered as part of that process. But the way we do it at the moment is unless if it's a local road they're accessing, it's supposed to be a notification and working through what those costs from that logging's impact on the local roads are. They're allowed to automatically access state highway, collector roads and arterials as of right. That's the way our district plan is set up. It's accessing local roads that then get to those major routes. There's a process where there's notification and discussion about whether the road can handle it or whether it gets handed over to them to maintain it during that period. They still have to keep it open for other public use, farm use and those sorts of things.
So how the splits work, Sharon, on the 90, so what was it, local is that what land goes you say?
It's in here.
Arterial's 1090 local, collectors 50/50 and local is 90 local and 10% district.
Oh, we're talking 1 year, aren't we?
That was quite a complicated calculation where they had to classify all the roads, Jules, didn't they? Say how many there was and
When it was a decision to say, well, how much of this contributes to people getting around the district versus how much of this road contributes to people moving around your local area. So what's fallen out of all of that, those costs for each of those areas, is that 67-33% split.
What about the roads that service government land that aren't paying rates in the district?
It's a wider issue that is legislative that we can't really control. So.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the land value is that the government owns it. As a council, we aren't collecting in rates. Be very interesting.
Manafeno already like your sediment.
But just in the wider thing of wider subject of roads, we talk about that side of it. there's a differentials aspect and that's been discussed. There's the forestry side of it. Was there any other pressures from anywhere else that have been coming through that we sort of missed or not thought about in terms of even smaller reviews, if that was the case, under the general subject? We just want to make sure that I don't recall submissions necessarily that would be relating to rating reviews. I can't recall anything along those lines.
The only thing for you, Worship, the only thing that's really happening from a transport point of view is the trucks are getting bigger and heavier. They're now 50 tonne. They used to be 30 or 40. So there's more of that usage, I suppose. But
I suppose I do agree that I suppose the feedback we've had from NZTA is that's becoming the new normal. You just have to deal with it within your budgets, and we've had that discussion about bridge upgrades. I think if our roading network was falling apart, we'd definitely be making that case to NZTA. I think the other issue that we said we're going to talk about is footpath rating. And there's potential in our fixed charges for that to be included in there, but we could probably, so it's almost, pardon?
Next.
Yeah, but we could rate it for some of our footpath work the way we rate for roads, or we could do it a different way. That's one option to think about when we're moving forward into the footpaths. So footpath renewals are currently paid for out of the roading budget. The bit we're talking about is where we put new footpaths in. Where in the past, that was paid for by the township that wanted those footpaths.
Yeah.
So
Can we finish the roading?
Yeah, sure. But it's part of this. It's funded like this.
And then in forestry, they don't count, trees don't get counted as capital value, though, do they?
They have a value, but it's not like having a house.
Your Worship.
I don't want to muck the, so much work making a tweak to it, but I still have in my mind an example down Hope where a landholder has half the size of the land of his forestry neighbour. He pays twice the amount of rates. The roading element in the forestry, and we calculate how many truck unit movements will be done in the 30-year period, and it's like, well, this isn't right. And it came back to he's paying on capital value, they're only paying on land value.
So
I don't know how, like, to me, from what I looked at it and the questions I've asked and looked at it over the years, there's still an unfair advantage going on forestry wise in our district for what goes into our comes into our
your worship, that should get picked up in that charging, Jill, should it not?
No.
Well, but there's a mix of charges. Some of our rates are on land value, and some of our rates are on capital
For
value.
road use, I mean, for forestry.
For what, sorry?
Road use, for when the loggers are using the roads.
Not if it's accessing a district arterial. There's no additional cost. It's only if it's accessing via a local road that you get an opportunity to have that discussion with them. But the proportion of rates we charge for land value and capital value is relatively small compared to all of our rates, but you'd have to look at the specific example to understand what's going on.
So which forestry company in the last 12 months has been charged to harvest their forest in the district?
Probably none.
None.
But it depends whether they're accessing a local road, because we've got designated forestry routes that have been upgraded historically that they're allowed to access without paying to get onto it. And that's up around Mahinarangi and those sorts of areas. There's a number of designated forestry routes that fall into that same category as a collector.
Are you suggesting, that, there's a valuation difference for capital value between, let's say, the normal rural properties farm and forestry, and therefore, the forestries aren't paying, the equivalent share of what it should be, and if that's what you're suggesting, is there any differential options for that, or is that what the problem that Southland had, Jules, that took forever to get through?
I think what Southland did was try to assess the impact that each of those land use types had on the roading network, and then allocate the share to that, which is a slightly different, more complicated calculation than saying the trees aren't being valued from a capital value perspective, so we should apply more of a capital value rate to a forestry property to another property. That would be two different ways of doing it.
Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So on that argument, that could be a fair way to look at it, maybe when you've got all forestry, but then you've got, so when I use our example, quarter of our places and trees, but we still get rated on capital value, we've still got houses and everything else. Instead of sheep, we've got trees. So that's different to what you're talking about. We're still getting rated that way. And the other thing in the argument as well is we do not know, we know the international owners, but local owners, we do not know how many of them are not ever going to log because of the carbon sink. And there are people like that. We're not, I can tell you that, I don't have to, but we're not. But there's a lot that aren't. They're just carbon sinks. What sort of a mess things are going to look like at year 40, 50, 60 or 70, goodness only knows. But I could see people walking away from them because they would have got their carbon out of it. So that's another complication in the debate, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, so from my perspective, anyway, I think they should contribute on their capital value. All other farming types, or whether it's a tourism venture out in the rural area, if they're generating a higher income, so, their capital value goes up, so they actually have to pay more rates. So why are trees exempt? That would be my question.
Trees are valued on per hectare. Okay, so
There's no capital value to them, is there?
no, you can value your trees for insurance purposes, so they'll come in and from my experience at Waipori, we've got a forest out there as well, it's about 50-50 land value to tree value, but then as age goes, they change again. So, but then one of the big banks for succession, they value trees at 30,000 a hectare, and that's what they project they'll be worth when they're logged at year 30 or 35. So there's a whole lot of different things out there. But once again, there's a difference between a major forest like down around your way, you've got like the Wisp and all those places compared to maybe someone like us who are still being valued on capital land value. It doesn't matter if there's trees or bloody sheep on there, it's all the same.
And through you, Your Worship, the way we have to rate based on what's on the district valuation roll, which is that's done by quotable value, do our revaluations every year. It gets audited by the Valuer General. That is what we have to do. So the value that they put on it is what we have to rate on.
So it's them that need to rate the value of a tree, because there is a capital value. People are carbon farming or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, true.
There's actually a capital value to the tree.
Yes.
Of course there is, otherwise why would you do it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
So just in terms of the valuation.
that's outside of our mixing of rates.
So, according to something I've just read online, council says the bare value of the land is built structures, standing timber, fruit crops, native bush, everything else are legally excluded from the capital value. So that isn't a decision that we're making. It's a legal exclusion, and we're not allowed to include that.
So that ends that conversation.
So, Your Worship, I'm happy to leave it as it is.
Jules, why didn't you read that out earlier? Right, Sharon, where's you from here?
Thank you, Your Worship. So from here we go to footpaths. So footpaths currently, as Jules alluded to before, are fixed.
New footpaths.
Yes, okay, I didn't put that in there. New footpaths, not renewals. Must be having a really bad
You're
day.
getting critiqued
I had a really bad
today,
day,
Sharon.
right?
Oh, Joe.
So, yeah, as Jules said before, footpath renewals are through the roading program. This is only new footpaths in your area. If you put in a new footpath, and they are currently loan funded and rated as a fixed charge within the community. So if you put a footpath in Balclutha pays.
Community of interest.
Yeah.
Really is.
Local
Yeah.
roading rating area.
Yeah, not community of interest, it's really just the townships.
Right.
And this was the problem that Clinton raised a year ago.
Yeah.
That they would like wider community to look at funds.
So, yeah, direction, there's a couple of options we've thought up here, or anything else you guys come up with, is to continue the way it is or investigate, put it all in a bucket, and every community pays the same fixed charge. So if you spend money in Balclutha, Milton and Lawrence, that goes into the bucket with everything else and gets split across all the communities, like a UAGC charge.
Which is actually what you decided to do with urban seal extensions. You said we're going to fund that from loans, and all the urban areas are going to pay a slightly higher rate to pay for those seal extensions across the district. So moving this to that same method would be what you've already decided for seal extensions. The other issue with footpaths, and this will be part of the LTP discussions, is with the NZTA cutting the funding, it's not sustainable with what we're doing now. So you're going to have to make some decisions on footpath funding and whether we actually do put more non-assisted funding into it to actually keep up with what our community are asking us to do. So it's potentially going to be wider than just these new footpaths that we're going to be discussing with you through the LTP.
Yeah. So for the likes of Clinton, say Tory Mouth,
Don't pay anything.
it would be easier to make it that those towns pay, rate them accordingly. At least they would get something.
No, the issue was the same when we had stormwater, right? And those that have been around for a while remember what it was like, is that it was the same sort of funding. It was the town area would be funding it, the urban stormwater area would fund things. And communities make decisions, rating decisions that says we can't afford this. And then they would flood. But our answer was it's not a localised section issue, it's a community-wide issue, and we're not putting money into it because you weren't going to fund it. And that was not the solution to the problem, right? We had to really look at it catchment-wide and look wider than that side of it. And so we did it like we did it with the other urban water and wastewater, went that whole district-wide bigger bucket approach. And of course, yes, we had then those same communities that said they couldn't afford it, suddenly says, oh, we need this, right? And we did fund a lot of those. But there were solutions. West Otago and all that, major solutions that they wouldn't have been able to afford by themselves if it was only that. We were able to do it. But you can bite it off, work program, sequentially by sequentially, prioritise what you need. And that was the principle of that. The same thing's applying, although it's not the same, not exactly the same thing in that sense, but you got the same problem is that we know our resident surveys are throwing out there, we're getting it in the neck all the time about things like footpaths, our elder population's getting older and all this sort of stuff, and we're not funding those. And our answer is when we're faced with the communities that are giving us heaps, we're saying, well, it's over to you to fund it, and then they have the inability to fund it. So we're losing the battle on that whole side of things, which is pretty important connector. And so the question we're raising, and we're not actually asking for your solution and approval today around that things. It was more about saying, particularly for rating review purposes, is this a subject where we look at it and put it into a rating review system? Because another way of modelling the change would be to look at it the big bucket approach, and at least do that homework for you to decide whether it's something you want to go down that pathway on. But the LTP's the time to do it if you're going to make a rating change for something, right?
Yeah, so make it clear.
I was just asking for a bit of history just as it relates to that last one. So Clinton Town,
Don't pay anything.
but in a previous life, there was a wider area paid a rate for the town.
No,
Always inside the boundary.
like this is really old history now, but in 2007, we went out to every community and said, new footpaths, if you want them, you can fund them. And there was a bunch of towns that said, yes, we want some new footpaths. Clinton and Waihola said, no, we don't want to pay anything more. That was only for new footpaths and new curb and channel. Before that, it just wasn't done, unless it was unless it could be funded as a roading improvement through a minor improvements program.
I might be going way back, but I had heard from some old timers over there that did the rural area. This might be going back
Before my time, if they did.
Yeah,
I don't know.
there was a bigger area, and then they pulled back to just the town.
Not sure, but certainly the renewals are paid for by the whole of the district.
That is what you in that second bullet point there is what we're talking about, isn't it? Do we extend the communities out?
Well, there's two ways to do it. You either extend it into the rural area and you look at your community facilities rate to fund it, or you say all the urban areas are going to fund it, which is when you're looking at more district-wide rating. We just want to make sure that no one says, well, Balclutha should only get what they're funding for it, which is what you're talking about for pool funding.
So if you were talking urban boundaries, George, you'd be sort of with a articulated water sort of map, aren't we?
It's really tight around the urban area. But there's maps.
Because that's the only place we've got footpaths. falls within those zones, isn't it?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Especially walking track.
So I'd be happy to see a modelling of that within the urban boundaries. If you remember our articulated water maps, that's where they all fall.
Yeah, 100%.
And then it comes to those communities that do want that fixed, at least there is some mechanism. Because it's got here at the moment, footpaths, fixed charge on page 20, Sharon, fixed charge for sewer. No. Yeah,
Yep, within that area.
Yes.
for sewer.
But that's only based on those historic renewals, and I think we did one extra one in Stirling, for example. But it's quite different to.
No,
Wow.
dropping, eh? That's, everyone's footpath rate's been going down, we've done no new ones, have we?
No, we haven't, but the rate will remain the same. It'll be the interest and principal that changes for the life of the loan. So the rate will remain standard until it's gone, but the loans,
The rate has remained standard.
yes, but the loans themselves are dropping.
Might finish earlier or something if the interest rate's lower.
Yeah, because, I think, pretty sure it's something like.
But are you arguing against modelling a, all areas put together into a bucket approach?
We should be.
Sorry.
I think it's time we should be. Because, I mean, it doesn't matter which community we're in, we should be able to walk down a footpath. And I know Tapanui, there was one street that was against it, so no footpaths went down Boundary Street or whatever. They just walk on the road. But I know our small townships like Clinton, there have been, for a long time, have been going on about footpaths. But
They haven't got them because they never wanted to pay for them.
yeah,
They didn't want to fund them, Michelle, so if you don't want to fund them.
It was 20 years ago.
they're right.
yeah, that was 20 years ago. Yeah, I do.
I mean, the
remember.
costs have gone quite, I mean, like when we went to.
Are we keeping up with what we've got?
No.
Keeping them tidy. You see, that's where I would like to see the bucket approach.
But that's
Yeah.
a different argument because that's
That's an
easy to
argument.
go.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll get that one.
Are some of those smaller communities economically sustainable long term? That's something else you have to look at.
Yeah, but that's
If you
why
want to
we,
carry on, putting wastewater pipes and or footpaths down for half a dozen houses, it's going to add to the rate burden for everybody over time. And I know we want more people and you want, but can you afford that?
No, I think, I was probably on the wrong track there, sorry, Barry. I was
No.
meaning what we've got to keep them up to spec rather than brand new ones.
Yeah, I understand.
So I think modelling on two rating scenarios would be good modelling. Urban boundaries. So that's the true, the immediate benefactors of footpaths would be the ones that pay the lion's share of it. Or under local rating, model that.
Well, that would be a pretty harsh one too, because the rural folks send their children to town to school, and after school they walk down the street, they walk down to the sports complex, they walk down to the tennis court, so.
Yeah, that's right. So they'd get picked up in the local rating model.
it's a minor rating review if you're only just changing between local rating rate area or urban boundaries. Because nothing else is really changing, right? It doesn't change the problem for Clinton or the smaller communities that can't afford the.
Well, it does, because Clinton's decided to pay zero towards footpaths.
No, the issue is that when you calculate now the cost per metre for new footpaths and you calculate the deficiency in terms of what they want, at a minimum, they just want that main street to be footpath. When you put the cost of that in and you say, well, now you're only paying for that yourself, that becomes the difficulty for affordability for them. And yet, in a lot of other things, we've taken that approach where we've said, in a much more expensive side of things, we've done that where we've done the stormwater and other bits and pieces and said, we're not expecting you to be direct user pays for those investments. We have to look sustainably, because we're a small district, as the bigger population base we possibly can, and we will chop it up and sequentialise the work and prioritise it, because it's a better way to do it, because we're going to have the money there to do that then. Because we couldn't get those stormwater projects done at the time, but we certainly could prioritise them and go from It's the only way we could see that you would substantially change the current position, which is you can never actually you can't get a footpath built in Clinton.
And it's exactly what we do with seal extensions in urban as well. Council prioritise them and said, these are what we think our priority is across the district. They've been funded across the district. Not funded from a specific township that pays for their urban seal extensions.
Which wouldn't have happened.
So then district wording is what you're saying.
No, we're saying you've got different ways of doing it. You could do it, there's really, if you want to spread it wider than we currently do,
Yeah.
you either do it
District
through
wording.
communities of interest, through like community facilities charging, or you do it through urban or the district roading rate. Those are really your main options, if you want to spread it wider. I suppose that's the key thing. Do you want to change from what we're currently doing? If the answer is yes, then what options do you want us to model? So the key thing is yes, look wider or don't, and then we can look at a couple of different options for you.
Righto, so those in favour want to don't review it and stick with what we've got, or look wider, as Jules is saying, if there's another model.
I'll agree to look wider if you give me the answer, is roading rate cap? Going to be rate cap?
Unfortunately, Councillor McAtee, no one knows.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Councillor McAtee, I can't answer.
As proposed, the rate cap is a cap on rates on expenditure, so there's no exceptions as of now. The exceptions are scenarios, so for example, when an emergency occurs, they're not an exception on how you spend the money.
So why I asked that question was that it may not be if we're looking at potential increased rates on the on roading, we're probably going to have other priorities.
No, I mean, to me, it doesn't sort of work through that way. Like if you kept the rating as it is, made no change, and Clinton suddenly wants to spend a bucket load of money on footpaths, right? For some reason, someone's got a lot of money. The rates revenue will increase, and the percentage of rates movement will increase as a result, right? So this is the problem when we have the example where people are happy to pay more, right? So that goes in there. The rates revenue increases. The difference between this year and the previous year, the percentage goes up.
But they won't be allowed under a cap.
Well, that's the challenge, is that if you have a community wanting to pay more for something, example being that one, like we might not change the rate. You could do nothing, like I said, with the review, leave it. But Clinton could spend a bucket load of money that will increase the rates as a result, right? So I think the 4% cap measurement on anything like that is not a valid comparison or concern for the reviews that we're talking about.
Right. So has Sharon got enough to?
No, because we want to know, and I just keep putting it because we have to do this. So I want to know, because we have to deal with Plymouth submissions. All those submissions that are saying from those small communities, we want some footpaths but can't do it. I just want to know to put that to bed now by not doing a review, or that we might give consideration to that by doing a rating review that includes that wider bucket approach. That's what I would like to know.
Let's do a rating review then.
So that's simple. Larry's put forward, we'll do a rating review. All those in favour?
Yep.
Right.
This direction. So when
Can
we
I-
say that we're talking about the footpaths.
Yes, can I just confirm, we want to do it, the big bucket approach by urban water, local roading?
You can do both.
Do
in a
both?
scenario.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's
They'll
not
only be
difficult.
slightly different.
It's not a difficult scenario.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Is that all right?
But nothing
You'd have been.
for the community facilities, right? That was mentioned as well. Thank you. Okie dokie. Next up, and actually last, unless we've got something in the anything else category, so last from me, unless there's something in the anything else category, is just a discussion about the residual costs. We wanted to bring this up here because there has been talk that potentially some of these things could be rated. And so just of note, we did an exercise partway through the annual plan, and The residual costs we came up with were 3.6 million. It won't be perfect and it will definitely be different next year, but that's about what we're looking at. And just that they are from activities that are on charge to other activities as internal overheads. So most of those costs will remain when Three Waters transitions. But management is going to be conducting a review of the overhead allocation method and the expected structure of council going forward post-water as part of the LTP process. So the question here is really, do you want to continue to leave those costs in overheads and see how the model comes out when we review it? Or did you want to investigate some of those costs potentially being rates? Bearing in mind they're quite hard to.
Can you give council, I mean, this came from some councillor comment or request. Can you give an example of what you mean in terms of the difference?
Between the two?
Of a particular activity, what
Finance.
do you mean? Yeah.
Finance?
Explain that.
Okay, so currently finance is allocated through to all the end user activities because we have an input into all sorts of things, water, libraries, community services, all that stuff. And that goes through as an overhead. So our costs get put in a bucket and then there's an allocation method that we did many years ago that pushes it out to all these end users where it is rated. So if we investigated rating finance costs, you would have a rate that was directly financed and you would have to choose who paid for that, but it would reduce the rates in the other areas. So it's the same quantum of rates. It's just, did you want to think about
Individualising it out, isn't it?
if you wanted to? And then if you do want to, how would you want to see that?
The one thing that we are a little bit concerned about is, and why it gets fed through an overhead model, is that not all of the cost of activity are funded by rates. Some of it is funded by fees and charges, right? And so, some of the finance costs that's filtered through, for example, the overhead model goes to regulatory as a cost. That forms part of the fees and charges, particularly in activity areas where you're 100% user funded, for example. Whereas if you did it, let's say 100% out there finance, it's 100% rate funded. Right? That's the concern. It starts getting complex if you then start splitting it up and all this sort of stuff. And ultimately, that's what the overhead model is designed to do, if it's done properly, to spread it appropriately to the various things. Right?
Councillor Cathwood, you had a point earlier on the swimming pool. And how much is in those internal overheads?
410 for just the Balclutha pool.
Just for the Balclutha pool? Yeah. Right, did I see Councillor McTamaney?
Yeah, I'd be a fan of having a look at this. That Balclutha pool example is a prime example. That is way out of whack. Like, it does not. We've got a manager for the Balclutha pool, in the Milton pool, and yet we have to. Supposedly, there's another 400,000 of costs internally to manage a $1.2 million budget. The model was wrong somewhere. It cannot be right.
Yeah, but if you want to, if that's what the issue is, but if that's where the issue is, then that is focus on getting the overhead model right.
Yeah. So
that's not the same as we'll charge out all finance to rates.
Yeah. Yes, I am interested in that because that distorts the whole modelling of that pool. We're looking at that costs a lot for the Balclutha and Milton pool. Yet nearly a third or a quarter of it is from these overhead costs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And if we've got a major problem if that's the actual true cost.
No, but you can deal with that by when you look at the methods of allocating internal costs to activities, you can apply any number of rules that you wish.
But
You can.
No, but we are saying that we need to be looking at that overhead model right from first principles, right?
Yeah,
and we can get a green light. Like I don't have a problem in thrashing out and debating with council the methods of allocating overheads so that it is appropriate, because it's just as important. At the moment, it's pushing out $400,000 to pools, right? Totally agree with you. But the way to solve that is to dive into how is that allocated. At the moment, we know it's not an appropriate method of allocation. We're open to changing that method of allocation, right? But that's not the same as I'm going to charge all finance to rating, because that's a totally different way of doing it. You can have a decision that says, I don't want more than, of finance, we don't think more than 1% or whatever it is of finance should go to that. That's a different decision. You can control that. It's just that we've not been able to, and we've told you this and acknowledged it, we haven't been able to put together a new appropriate overhead model that's actually robust. We know you can drive a tractor through the current one. So we're totally wanting to change that.
Yeah, well, just where I would probably pull the whole lot out, keep it simple, and probably rate on it, if it could be done, rate on that whole business side of the council becomes a
Separate rate.
separate rate.
Yeah.
So the problem with that, and take finance. So the finance, part of finance supporting regulatory, which is predominantly, let's say, half of the activity or more is user funded, right? So at the moment, you would get, a reasonable proportion of that finance charge paid for by applicants, right? Not the ratepayer. And if you change it to 100% of finance activity goes to the ratepayer, you are not apportioning costs appropriately to the activity. That's the problem. If everything was just funded by rates,
But you don't.
then it's not a problem.
You still don't have to do that. You just have a budget. You'll have a budget this year. We're going to have X amount coming in from fees or whatever, and then we need X amount else. X amount of other dollars to
That's what you do now.
finance department.
No, because you can only charge fees to recover the costs of the activity. If you don't have overhead costs of finance in the activity, you cannot charge the fee. You can only charge a smaller fee. So you can't do that. You can't go, well, I'll keep my fees from sales and we'll do it this way. No, the overhead cost, the finance, this is how you do it. You allocate all the costs to an activity, right? So regulatory has IT support, it has finance support, all this sort of stuff, right? And the overhead model system is, we'll correctly identify what that amount is. We'll push it to the activity of regulatory, right? And we'll determine what proportion of that needs to be funded by rates. That's why you do a revenue and financing policy. Let's say I want to get 50% of that by rates and 50% by fees. You know the cost, therefore you have a rationale to charge fees. And that's an auditable process, right? You can't just charge on willy-nilly, you can only charge on a cost. That's what happens. If you take the finance out, you remove that as a charge to regulatory, you cannot charge for it. So it's not an issue what you're proposing if all we did was fund by rates. It is when there are other methods of where you need to be funded. That's what I'm saying. And the appropriate way, I'm saying, given those issues, to address your question that you've got and your concerns, which is perfectly correct, is to fix the overhead model so that only appropriate allocations are made to the various activities. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I agree with it.
But you're going to blow everything else to bits, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, but it's around the regulatory system that they have to run, Simon, to allocate the fees.
I
So
get
the whole
that.
point is, as he says, if we take all the money from rates, then we can't charge a fee for that.
Yeah, I get that. So
Yeah, so it's with they have to work within the constraints that they've been given, and they're trying to work out. And he's already saying that the overhead model isn't right. They want the opportunity to look at it and fix it.
I get that. But so instantly from that pool, logic will tell you that 400 odd thousand is going to have to get shifted to somewhere else where it's right.
But in regulatory, if it was $210 an hour, it covers all the departments, isn't it? Why isn't the fee, it's just an administrative, why can't it be just bundled as one fee? It includes departments within the council. I can't believe that you can't.
No,
You get a budget of we're going to collect $500,000 in fees and charges, and there's a residual finance over the top of it. You can recover, you can get your fees and charges and recover your art.
you can only recover what is the cost of the activity, which if you take out overheads, you're not being able to charge for it. Right? Just simple. You can only charge what the cost is. So that's the whole point of an internal overhead model, is that you're allocating the other part of overhead model is if it's done properly, you're supposed to get the correct total cost of an activity of council that's delivered, right, at the end point activity. And that. So yeah, that's the problem. I really think David, help me here if
I'm agreeing with everything.
It doesn't, it's getting it transparent.
Happy to absolutely agree with you and commit to that overhead model review, which is essential to getting right.
Yeah.
And so therefore that comes back, that's part of our job as governors, to make sure that they get that stuff right.
Yeah.
So it's about us asking for the right information so we understand that the overhead model is working correctly. So then we all understand that, so that that's up to us as governors to ask them the right questions to make sure things are being done correctly.
But am I wrong in saying that some councils do have a rate to charge for some of the administration or the council?
You're probably not wrong by saying they did that. What I'm trying to say to you is that to do that sort of thing, you've got to go down that same sort of pathway of determining on what basis will you part separate that. So finance activity is the total amount. We need to get some to regulatory. We need to get some to other fee charging areas. Okay, so there's got to be a decision around how we're going to allocate that. And you might then decide that a proportion of that will be done by pure rate. But that's another complicated model that you have to work through to do that. If you have a well-reasoned, well-supported, well-agreed overhead model, it should be doing exactly the same thing.
But in the meantime,
So on residual
I've got
costs.
direction. Sharon wants some direction. We're about to close for a break for the next session. So give Sharon some direction, please.
So just on residual costs, Sharon, for this one here. Could we get a model of it sort of in reverse? Because we know where we're going with our RTP. So this year, what's our rates intake for 26, 27?
The percentage-wise movement or the total?
No, because we've got 20% movement on 46 million. So what are we up to?
Sorry, I'm not too sure straight off the top of my head.
56.
56 million?
20%.
Yeah. So can we have a model of losing 51% of that, which is what we've identified for water? So that would be our starting point of 27, 28. So can we?
That's that's exactly what we're after too. Right?
Yeah.
So Sharon's asked me, finance are looking to get what's the starting baseline for the LTP. I have to say to her, we haven't got a starting baseline yet because we've got to do some serious homework pretty quickly to say, well, what will the organisation look like, and what are we going to be, what is going to be the actual structural costs with waters removed, right? So I've said to the team, it'd be easy for me to just go, well, just keep all those residual costs as a starting basis. But I don't think it's correct. I mean, you wouldn't expect me to just accept that.
I haven't finished.
We
I'm
should
saying, so let's get that baseline, right? So let's have 20% on top of where we were, right? So we know what we're doing.
No, but it'll
26, 27.
No,
reverse it. Take the 51 off, and then just put the cost of the actual, the cost not of the overall activity, but the actual cost of that activity. You know what I mean?
You've modelled that already to determine what that residual cost is going to be, just from a wider sense. That's where we got those figures from.
So you're talking
Not
about
the rating costs. I'll give you an example. What's the operational costs of a pool? Something like that. What are the operational, the raw costs? Because then they'll tell you what position we're in.
Well, that's not going to change other than Milton. It's not going to change, and the only thing that's going to change is the overhead.
No, all of it. Like the actual, not the internal costs and all that. Put that to the side, and then you know where we're at.
Councillor, in relation to what's on the screen here, where does that fit in?
Residual costs.
Residual costs. And
To get to the residual costs,
yeah, which
take your
they've
full
done.
total amount of rates, take away 51%, which you know is disappearing, your LTP, right? It's going to be your starting figure. And then you go.
Yeah,
You get to your
well,
figure.
I think you've got the message across. So, is there any more direction to Sharon?
Yeah,
Just seems to be going nowhere.
Instead of going
Councillor
forward,
Ross.
I am going to suggest, Mr Mayor, that we continue to include these costs within our overhead allocations. As part of our direction for Sharon.
But with the proviso that we review.
Yeah.
It's on the roadmap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Am I allowed one more rating question?
As long as it's not an amendment.
It's the regulatory one. That's one that's been growing quite spectacularly. It's on capital value. I just, especially the urban rural thing. Part funds some of these costs. If we're fully collecting the costs, why do we have to put it on a capital value?
Through you,
But
Your
obviously
Worship,
not fully collecting the funds.
So the planning side is not 100% user funded.
Yes, I know, I'm being a bit
So-
cheeky there, but
are we on the anything else?
Yes.
on anything else.
So are we finished with this one?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, sorry.
And can it be, have we got enough room to put that back under the UATC regulatory?
The planning and regulatory rate?
I mean, I think it's pretty topical because we have to think what's life going to be looking like under the regional plan sort of stuff and things, and what impacts will it have. So, I mean, there is a long-term view needed around where we go with that sort of stuff. So maybe it's completely appropriate to consider that.
Yeah, just from a fairness thing, in urban rural, when I looked a few years ago, and we're sort of heading towards $1,000 rates for that regulatory as against 50 or 60 in town. Now, I could handle that if I knew that the council was spending a lot of that time on their planning and regulatory for the rural areas. But if they're not, and if it's distributed over everybody, then
Right.
So we could certainly.
Anything else
others
under
agree,
other?
we can certainly do that.
So everyone's happy for me to review that? Yep, perfect.
Anything else? Okay, we'll break. It's 3:05. We will start again at 3:20. Have a stretch.
thank you, Sharon.
not what Roger told me. Plenty of rumours running around. Okay.
Right, hit the button, thanks, Vicky. Right, welcome back. We'll head on to session number 2. We've got the report summary here from Peter.
So thank you. I might just introduce Walter Clark, who is on the screen, and will talk to the slides shortly. I'll just frame the conversation. As you can see on the screen, what we're looking to achieve today is your direction on acceptance and use of the growth projections. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then once we get to the end of the process, consider adopting the high series of projections as recommended by Utility Limited, which Walter will also talk to. So I might hand over to Walter if that's okay.
Welcome, Walter.
Thanks, Peter. You guys all hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, I will start just going through those slides. So, broad agenda for today. Some of you may remember me from 3 years ago. It's much the same as last time. It seemed to work fairly well. But I'll then so we've somewhat of a rinse and repeat method with the latest information. So I'll give you a quick update on some of those changes and what has changed in that interim 3 years. A broad overview of the main component of this, which is obviously the resident population, and that includes some of the historical context, what's happened in the Clover district in the last 25, 30 years, and some of those scenarios in terms of what's likely to happen in the next 30, or what may happen in the next 30.
Walter, just before you get into it, mate, so your background is?
I'm an engineer by background, but I'm now also an accountant, but I'm an infrastructure consultant who's got a background in infrastructure engineering and accounting. I've done growth projections for councils for about 20 years. Based in Arrowtown, myself and a business partner, Paul Crowder, who's also done some work in Clover and some of your neighbours. And yeah, we've been involved with Clover, as I said, the first ones we did was about 2021 LTP, 24 LTP, and the subsequent 2027 LTP.
Dirty. Thank you.
So yeah, obviously aside from resident population, it's important for councils to understand what's going to change in the houses and the households, the mix of the residents, also the visitors, like a lot of districts in New Zealand. There's a visitor component to your district, and obviously the rating units from a financial point of view. More people means more rating units, which means more rates. We do have what we call settlement projections, which is the next level down from the district. So again, it's one thing to try and forecast the population in the district. It's also important to understand where that growth is likely to occur. So we get it down to the townships, the large ones and some of the smaller ones, and obviously the rural areas surrounding them. We'll then summarise with some key points and any questions at the end, but feel free to interrupt or interject at any point throughout. And I think Peter sort of framed it up with those key questions or key decisions we'll be looking for at the end. Any questions on that? Yes, in terms of while we're here, what's included, we're covering the period of the LTP plus another 20 years, so it's linked to your 30-year infrastructure strategy, starting from, call it 2027, 1 July 2027 as a starting point. It goes forward 30 years. It includes the resident population, and we also look at the age demographics, which is a very important component. We split the residents into 5-year cohorts, get an understanding of that, how that's likely to change in the future, and also the mix of the households within the district in terms of how people are choosing to live together. And as I said, the subsequent components of the growth projections of those houses, both houses that are used by the residents and those holiday homes that have different infrastructure demands. Your visitors, which obviously has a
sort of an average or typical day component, and then there's also the busier times, peak days, Christmas, summers, where towns or townships can grow significantly, and then the rating units just fall out of that. So that's all at the district level, and then we go, as I said, we go to the settlement level for the resident population. But yeah, the key caveat that I always start with when presenting these to councils is that these aren't just projections. There's a huge amount of uncertainty. There's a lot of crystal ball gazing. There's an infinite number of scenarios, both at an international and national, regional, district, township level that influence these. These are not what Clover District Council make happen. These predictions, they just help inform decisions. They help councils understand what they need to plan for. But yeah, there is a lot of moving parts that obviously, which is why we revisit them every 3 years, and why we don't bet the house on any one scenario being right. Does that make sense? Okay, next slide, please, Peter. So in terms of what we've got that we didn't have 3 years ago, obviously the last time I spoke to council, I did this work, it was March 2023. That was literally that's about the same time that the census was being taken. The last two censuses have been plagued with predominantly IT and data issues that have taken Statistics New Zealand a long time to get the information out, but obviously it is out now. It's been out for about a year. So there's a lot more information available. Obviously last time as well, we had the not so distant memory of COVID and the impact of that. So there's a little bit more stability now, but a more recent census. We haven't had a worldwide pandemic for a good few years. So we've got some more information, which is good. And obviously we have another 3 years of building consent data. And so we've included all those, the latest information into these projections, into this work, so we can consider what the future is going to look like. So the next slide, just summarise. Yep. So conscious you may not be able to see the detail here, but this is just a good way to look at the way Statistics New Zealand presents these projections. They use the term series or scenarios. So the low series is typically pretty doom and gloom. That's the red line. You can see where the population for Clutha would actually start decreasing. I'm not aware of any councils that use the low series for anything, and we have sort of planning. The medium series is the orange one. That is still has the strap line that StatsNZ recommends councils use that. We'll touch on that in some more detail later in the slide pack. And the green line is the high series, the StatsNZ high series. So you can see, going back 20 plus years, there was a time when the population in Clutha was declining. But as of about the sort of mid-2010s-ish, there's been some really positive story coming out of Clutha in terms of the population increasing again. And it's actually been growing quite steadily. Sort of almost 1,800 residents over the last 20 years from that sort of low point in the mid-2000s. But just to put this in context with some of the other areas of New Zealand, with Clutha District is still in the sort of the low, or just it's probably at the top of the lower quartile in terms of New Zealand councils. Obviously the likes of Selwyn and Queenstown and Tauranga City and some of those areas are sort of, they're trying to work out if they're going to double in size in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. So we are still talking about growth somewhere in the region of 20% more people that live in Clutha at the moment. So it's just worthwhile considering that. The previous projections that we used 3 years ago are also shown there. That's the dotted line. So the latest StatsNZ high population series is about 1,000 people higher than where we were this time 3 years ago. Anyone want to discuss any of that before we move on? Silence is good. And just in terms of, as I said, the good news story, the reality is that population is simply, population change is made up of two simple components. One is what we call natural change, that's shown in the graph in grey. That is simply the number of births that the community or a district has, take away the number of deaths. So you can see in Clutha that's been relatively constant and has been positive. But the big change is that the main driver of population change across New Zealand is migration. And obviously some of that is driven out of, we're not talking about migration into New Zealand, that is a factor. Obviously the more people that come and live in New Zealand means that there is that trickle down effect from the cities. And that's what a lot of the regional and rural districts of New Zealand have seen in the last 10 or 15 years. There's basically been more opportunities to not live in a city, and a good portion of the population is taking up that offer. So you can see that step change again about 10, 15 years ago, where instead of losing people every year, which was partially offset by positive natural change, the district's actually been having people move to the district between 50 and 100 people a year. So that adds up over time, and that's the positive driver behind that story. And just to put the projections in context, the Stats NZ High series projects over 100 people a year continue to migrate to include the district, whereas the medium series is more like 40, which is a bit lower than the recent average. And the natural change, over time, that natural change does decrease. We'll touch on this in detail when we get to the age demographics, but the entire world population is aging, New Zealand population is aging, and with that, the natural change does start to decrease over time. Any specific questions about that? The next slide, I won't propose to go into any great detail. We put this up last time. It's just a really good summary of some of the economic indicators that are available for infometrics. It's a very good tool. A lot of councils use it. You can compare, it shows the cyclical nature of any economy. It shows how Perth is comparing to the rest of New Zealand. It shows the key sectors and what's driving some of that migration. And again, there have been times going back 15, 20 years where we did try and, or companies I work for did try and incorporate some of these factors directly into a population projection series, but that's where you get quite complicated and don't necessarily, in the accuracy, you just confuse people. But this is the level of information that is available to your council officers and to the teams, which can be useful for the likes of planning roads and forestry and changing land uses and comparing yourself to other areas. But that slide is really just for information purposes only.
How recent is that information?
This, from someone, one of the others may be able to agree, but this gets published annually, at least, maybe even, so it's pretty up to date. Some of those trends are sort of looking at 5 years up to, they might even publish some of this quarterly, but it's all the same information that comes out of Stats NZ, just gets bundled up. GDP, CPI, land use activity, building consent information. So yeah, it's good data. It's not reliant on census per se, so it is more frequent than that 5-yearly snapshot that we get for the likes of population and house counts. As I said, I'm certain it's annual. It may even be quarterly or biannual.
Yeah, I would have actually thought in the economic summary that would be going a lot better than what's actually here.
Yeah. I think if you go back 2 years, it was probably a bit more of a positive story. The last year or two hasn't been so rosy for a lot of areas.
Yeah, for the Cleveland district, it's been pretty good. There's a few councillors in the room. Their income's probably doubled in the last 6 months. So.
Yeah. Maybe they're hiding it from Stats NZ.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next slide. This is the key. Essentially, we've limited the scenarios to three simple Stats NZ scenarios: Stats NZ high, medium, and low. The Stats NZ high scenario is still consistent with the recent trends. It does provide a good balance of sort of likelihood, and it's got that robustness that it is directly from Stats NZ. So in terms of any negotiations with central government or other affected parties, it's good to have that link to. It's not something you just made up yourself and tried to roast it. It's based on something the Boffin and Wellington created. The median scenario is an option, but it's yourself and a lot of other councils would have found if they'd adopted the median series over the last few years, they would have undercooked growth by quite a bit. It has been quite conservative. You can see from the projections that stats NZ have increased both their low, their medium and their high, but it's still quite a conservative option in my opinion. And as I said, the low is typically not used. It's a very pessimistic view of the world, so that's not considered. So based on that, the recommendation is to use the stats NZ high. We've put that to the council officers and to the LT endorsed. I do mention there that there is an option, obviously, to take some sort of hybrid scenario. I have had some clients and councils use a medium high as a nice in between. But obviously, with that becomes a very sort of subjective need to try and work out exactly where between the medium and the high you might want to land. So my recommendation at this point in time, and bearing in mind we're talking about the difference between 15% growth and 22% growth, we're not sort of talking about the population doubling or tripling. It does get revisited, therefore the stats NZ high scenario makes sense for me. It's what we used last time. It just happens that the stats NZ high scenario is slightly higher than last time. And what that would mean would be another 4,000 people from our 2027 starting point, which is about an extra 1,000 compared to where we were this time 3 years ago. Any thoughts on that? I'll just take you through, if that sort of silence is acceptance, I'll just take you through these are some of the quite important considerations of and again, regardless of the scenario, these trends still exist. So these are what we call age pyramids. The green areas is what the current, the 2027 view of the Clutha looks like now, and the blue dotted line is what that's predicted to be in the future. So that graph there shows that obviously because the population is growing, most of those 5-year age cohorts, which is the younger kids down the bottom and the older people at the top, you can see most of those cohorts increase in number, but the key when considering the makeup of a population or a community is really the percentage. So if you go to the next slide, Peter, the next slide, the better way to look at these graphs is considering the percentage of your community in each of those age brackets or bundled up into those different age brackets. And you can see here Clutha compared to New Zealand. In all cases, the current population in the green, you can see that the elderly population above 65 years old, the portion is a lot higher. So we're going to have a lot more people aged over 65 than we do at the moment. And we're also going to have a higher percentage of our community will be aged over 65. And the table down the bottom there just summarises both New Zealand as a whole and the Clutha district, how that change impacts each of those 5-year, they're bundled up into 0 to 14, 15 to 39, 14 to 64, and 65 and over. So there's going to be a smaller portion will be in that sort of 15 to 39 years, and a larger portion will be in that 65 years and over. That's quite a key consideration when it comes to infrastructure planning. The next slide is a different way to look at it. That's your ratio. It's your ratio of people aged 15 to 64, what we've used to sort of represent the working age. And obviously, there's exceptions to that. You can see that ratio decreases over time. So that means a smaller portion of our population, of our communities, are actually in the workforce. So that has quite a big impact on infrastructure. The way to think about it is it's a lot more duck ponds and a lot less sports fields. But yeah, it does have flow-on effects to infrastructure, footpaths, roads, and obviously it becomes an ability to pay with councils across New Zealand having rates going up and up and up. A lot of fixed charges, and for people that are on a fixed income or retirement income, that can be really challenging. So that's not a Clutha district issue, that's a New Zealand-wide issue. But it's a big part of these predictions, even though there's some good stories in there around population growth. There's the reality that the population is aging.
Walter, there must be a lot more out there now on the percentages of our so-called elderly that are still working, because there's a lot working well past 75.
Yep. Yeah, no, like anything, there's an averaging effect here, and obviously there'll be some very soon in retirement age, probably not be 65, it'll be 70, and then might be 70, be 75. So yeah, this is just indicative, but it does mean that, and that's why those 5-year cohorts are useful, because it goes all the way up to 85 years and over. And that's the nature of the modern society. People are living longer, which brings its own, it changes the dynamics of the community, and that's offset by less births at the other end, so there's less young people coming through. But yes, obviously there will be some exceptions too. There'll be some kids working at the age, my kids were both working at the age of 14, 13, not full time of course, but they do a lot more than I did when I was that age. And yeah, the older population will also still be part of that workforce. And based on this, they may need to be, depending on how that pans out. So yeah, that's the aim. There's some more detail in the report about that and some of the considerations. The next few slides just really summarise, based on that high series, based on 4,000 extra people over the next 30 years, what that means in terms of extra houses, about 2,100 houses over that time, 70 houses a year, pretty consistent with what you've been getting in the way of building consents, probably fractionally higher than the last 10-year average. That links into the sort of the spatial planning and obviously changing RMA and changing spatial planning provisions in terms of where those houses might go. The household mix you can see is changing at different rates for those, a lot more in the way of what they call other multi-person households. So family households are still the predominant mix, but they don't increase at a greater rate as those other multi-person households. And then there's also some one-person households, people choosing to live alone, which is quite a significant share as well. The visitor information is based on some good work central government used to do and no longer provide for us. So that has just been updated from last time. We did have a really good tool that before COVID and during COVID called data ventures. The simple Southland information that MB rolled up to provide for councils in terms of estimating the population over a year on a given day in a given area. Unfortunately, that service is no longer available, so we'll just use what we had from last time. You can see the visitors are also predicted to grow as they are across the country. And obviously that has a flow-on effect to the rating units. 2,500 rating units, predominantly been residential, but then some non-residential, industrial, commercial, business type properties also being required to accommodate extra people. And then the next two slides just sort of show that information the same way. That's some recent building, that's your recent building consent history. So you can see that's new residential building consent. So we're not counting someone in the bedroom or someone by the fire and someone building a deck. And again, you can see that's trended up. There was a boom in the mid-2000s when that population trend started to change, the migration becoming positive, and that's continued with some clear economic cycles of post-GFC, a bit of a lull, and then some pretty positive signs up until COVID, and then a bit of a slowdown again. But for the most part, it's definitely trending in the right direction. Conscious of time, so the next two slides sort of speak to themselves. It's just a different way to look at the house projections. Again, predominantly residential houses in the dark green areas for design, around the Catlins and some of those nice coastal areas. The holiday homes that will continue. And again, that's higher than those. That dotted line shows the total houses that we had from the previous 2023 projections. The visitor numbers are much the same. They haven't, as I said, they haven't changed a great deal over time. Slightly higher on the peak day and very similar on the average day. And there is hopefully some potential for the central government to revisit some of that data ventures information with technology and what's available now. So that as it stands, we've just updated those based on slight changes to the population. And then the rating units, again, that is split into those 5 categories. Your rating data is split into residential and non-residential, the main ones, non-residential being commercial, business, industrial. we don't factor in any sort of land use changes in the rural industry sector in terms of the number of rated units. Obviously, farms get bundled up and split out over time. And there is that change in land use around dairy. That's still a rural industry property. The count doesn't change over time. But it is important to understand, again, from a planning point of view, ensuring there's enough non-residential land for those businesses to develop and grow. And obviously that's got a link for yourselves. That is last time you're relatively close. You're a part of a southern region with the Otago region with some of those cross district or regional factors and then ports, those sort of things that can drive demand in specific parts of the district. And then the final slide before we close up is just, as I said, with those stats and projections, which go down to what they call statistical area 2. And the likes of Balclutha will be split into Balclutha East, Balclutha North, Milton's its own statistical area. We've broken those projections down by into those different settlements. You can see it on the bottom. So most of the growth is occurring in the main towns of Balclutha and Milton. You can see in the green bars, that's the number of people over the 30-year period. The breakdown of the 4,000 people across those different areas. But the dots represent the percentage growth, so that's also quite important to see. So some of those smaller areas like Tauri Mouth, like Tapanui, are actually, although their population changes and is great, their growth rate is actually some of the highest in the district. So that becomes part of their consideration as well, just to make sure that there is enough provision for extra houses and people in those areas. Any questions about that one?
I just note, Walter, on page 29 in our workshop manual that you've got Balclutha, Milton, Tapanui and Clutha Valley settlement as the highest population growth. But when you look at this graph, Clutha Valley aren't as high as what you're saying in there.
Sorry, say that again.
On page 29 of the workshop manual, you've got where the highest population growth is forecast. We've got Tapanui, Clutha Valley, Balclutha and Milton, but when you look at Tauri Mouth,
Tauri Mouth's got the highest it's got the highest growth rate, it's not the highest in absolute growth.
Right.
The absolute growth is still those ones on the left, Balclutha, Milton, Tapanui, Clutha Valley, that's the most people. But the Tauri Mouth and the Wales, for example, have got a relatively high growth rate.
Right. Thank you.
Your worship, page 43 shows the map that includes Clutha Valley, which is quite more extensive than I would have called Clutha Valley. It goes almost to Rome Harbour.
Page 43.
I'll say where all the growth's going to be.
No, but it's like right around Balclutha as well. It's right around Balclutha.
I think the other maps are quite old, aren't they?
Is that why you've proposed that growth is so great for Clutha Valley when you look at the map on page 43?
I don't know, so these companies, there's a huge caveat with these predictions at that level do come out of Statistics New Zealand. They do rely heavily on recent trends, which are obviously good to a point. But if there are some of those localised factors that are new or they haven't considered, so that's, I won't propose to understand exactly where the bottoms of line can come from, but where that comes from. But they do go to the trouble of breaking those predictions down into those areas. You've got some further complications in that some of your smaller townships like Awaka and Kaka Point and some of those smaller townships are what they call, what states indeed refer to as settlements as opposed to statistical areas. So there is a process there. We have to break those predictions out to try and get down to that to the township level.
Walter, on page 37, you've got there that there's 2,180 vacant buildings. It seems a lot.
Vacant properties, vacant lots.
Oh, so empty sections type thing.
Yeah. So that's a rating unit. That's a rating unit classification.
Right. Sorry.
So yeah, that next slide, Peter takes us to the final slide there, just summarising those key points. The recommended projections, the high series, it is higher than the 2023 version, so it's consistent with recent positive growth. Like anywhere in New Zealand, there's a live-work-play sort of ethos to rural and regional councils. So the regional towns are seeing a lot of growth. Most parts of rural New Zealand are seeing this sort of migration out of the cities, which is great. As every council in New Zealand needs to be thinking about the ageing population and what it means, both short-term and long-term, and how it will affect infrastructure demand, provision for services, and the ability to pay. And yeah, those is just as we touched on, those local growth nodes, any of those district or regional projects in certain areas can have a huge influence on exactly where the growth is likely to occur. And finally, obviously, growth is one thing. We might have more people, but it's not to say we'll necessarily have more demand. Human behaviour does change over time. Levels of service, more conscious of our water use, higher petrol prices. People move away from cars or change their behaviour with cars. Technology, AI, all those other drivers that come into it. So nothing is linear, nothing's a direct link. So in terms of asset management and infrastructure, it's important to bear in mind. And there's always a crystal ball on the right.
Yeah, we look at one daily too. Right.
Yeah, so that takes you to your last slide. Decision time. Or not decision time, direction time.
So does anyone have questions for Walter? Very detailed report there, Walter. Thank you very much. If there's no questions for Walter, we do have a couple of recommendations there. So council provides direction on acceptance, but we have a directive there to do we direct staff to adopt. We have a directive there to direct staff to adopt the high series projections for the purposes of the development of the long-term plan.
I actually believe it'll be medium myself, but I don't hate to be pessimistic. Looking at the numbers,
Climate change, Dane, the weather's improving down here, mate.
I agree. Oh, no, I'm just thinking of what we've produced housing-wise and producing 75 new houses a year. We've got 75 sections for sale in the whole country.
So it's not determined by the sections for sale. I mean, look at the building that's going up. It's an infill building. There's still plenty of vacant sections around the district. And this is what you're seeing. It's not. That's why we don't see major subdivision developments out there. There's still quite a bit of capacity.
It's just like looking at the numbers. I'm like, would we really do that?
But then when you think how many people come and work here from outside.
Yeah, we've got a huge migrant population ever growing. We need to.
I've got no problem because there's no effect. Choosing high doesn't worry me.
Well, I think you go high because it's better to be overcooked than undercooked.
But it doesn't relate to me.
Any more discussion?
Doesn't relate.
Bruce? Simon? Michelle?
We go high.
Go high.
Go high.
Which high? Councillor Smith?
What really difference does it make if we go medium or high in the overall picture?
Yeah. I'm more concerned if you keep chewing that pen, you'll choke.
Don't choke on your coke.
It's keeping me awake.
I mean, it's true that we are not a growth council where it makes a big difference what you're projecting from a budget perspective and in terms of revenues you receive from developments, which is a big part of revenue generation in those places. It's true in that sense. But it's also important, though, I mean, if you think strategically around our investments and other bits and pieces and things like that, if you had a projection that had stagnant growth and that side of things, then it's hard to argue about what is the level of investment required for things. So it's the picture that all just joins up the dots on things, so it's consistent with that. If we know our businesses are now in a position where the biggest business is saying we're still in a position we need people down here to do things. They're all part of the offset to other issues that might otherwise reduce growth. So it's just a consistent messaging, but it's true in a pure dollars and cents revenue generation aspect side of things. It's not as significant as the big growth councils rely on for those things, right?
So infrastructure wise growth, Steve, like the whole area in there, it's still growing, isn't it?
Yep.
Because it's getting closer to Dunedin.
But if you look at what's happening, Silver Fern, Denone, Sterling's changing, you're going to hopefully have an inland port. Growth could explode.
There will be an inland port. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
It's just whether we can cater for that. A lot of people that may come in, that they're going to end up
You take every
in
opportunity.
different type districts.
We've started putting up tents at airports.
That's good.
Right, so recommendation is high. For
Aye.
high. Yeah. All those in favour to go high. There. Thanks so much, Walter, for your time.
All right, good to see you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Session 3. Welcome, Cosmos. Cosmos.
You've got to convince them that it's
Welcome. Whatever.
We're going swimming, Dave.
Good afternoon. Today I'm in the company of Megan. Support me with some of the more technical questions that may come up. The climate change workshop. So the main outcome that we'll be seeking today is just to increase the understanding that elected members have of our current climate change strategy. And secondly, to get direction on areas to investigate or action that may emerge from the discussion, considering some of the information that's been put in the report and that we've been putting in the slides now. Go to the next. So just to define climate change for our purposes, we just put in there some of the key features or key items that give its nature. So it's long-term in nature, which means the changes that occur due to climate change occur over a long period of time and are observable over long periods. And the changes manifest in changes in average weather patterns and the frequency and severity of extreme weather events, and can be observed at a local, regional, or global scale. And in simple terms, it's just changes in temperature and precipitation patterns that we observe. So for the Clutha district, this is what climate change is likely going to look for us. So there's an expectation that there will be an increase in average temperatures, which is estimated to be up 1 degree by the year 2040. There's going to be more extreme hot days than we previously observed. Increasing air frost. The patterns of rainfall will vary and in local areas as well. Observation of more drought conditions, including increasing risk of floods and increased coastal erosion, flooding, There is some anecdotal evidence from local observations of local experts, local knowledge that says some of these changes are beginning to manifest. So people are already starting to observe less frost, less snow days. Sometimes some of the years we don't get a snow day in some places. So that's some of the changes that are beginning to manifest now. Slide. So the risk, climate change. So there's a risk that's been tracked on the Risk and Assurance Committee radar, which is the risk of failure to manage an effective response to climate change. And that risk is currently rated as high. And there's some work that's being done to reduce that risk rating to low, and it was presented in the previous Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. Climate change risk or climate resilience is one of the 5 focus areas for the Mayoral Forum, Regional Mayoral Forum. The Auditor General has also published expectations around how public organizations manage the climate change risk. I put in the report, there's an excerpt in that report that that summarizes what those expectations are, and they're quite clear in terms of how much is expected in terms of the risk assessment and measurement of the outcomes of what would have been implemented. There's a national commitment that's been made at national level around climate change in terms of emissions reduction, that we are also, as a community and as an organization, contribute to. So I'll just go to the next slide. So in 2019, there was a project that was commenced here at CDC. The project was to get understanding of the impacts and the risk that climate change poses to the district. So the main idea behind that was to leverage professional expertise and blend it with the local knowledge that is there to get a clear understanding of the level of risk that we faced as a district. That work, if you look at the timeline that is on the right there, that work culminated in the climate change strategy, which has been adopted in 2024. But if you look at the timeline, there's still the actual implementation of the action on the climate strategy that needs to be done. And there's also the aspect of reviewing the climate change strategy to see if it is working and making the changes that are required to make it more effective. So just going to the climate change strategy in more detail. It is just a roadmap that was developed to enable council to achieve its climate objectives. And so the objectives are, number 1, to provide leadership in the area of climate change. So not just within the organization, but within the district. So generally setting tone for the district in terms of how to respond and how to manage climate change risks. The other objective is to initiate community engagement and provide awareness within the community. The third objective was to coordinate climate change related work, because there's already a lot of work that's being done by different activities within the organization and other community organizations and other partners, including the Tribal Regional Council. But the objective here is to coordinate that work, make sure it's aligned, and that it is recorded that the work is being done. The fourth objective is to provide an agreed baseline data set for planning and tracking. So, as an example, this year we're going to have our first emissions report, which will act as our baseline, from where we can then set targets and then compare progress going forward based on that. So the key component of our strategy, I mean, the main information that drives our strategy is the risk assessments, because that's what informs the level of risk that we face, and that's what helps us to prioritize our actions. So this is the work that has been done, that has informed the climate change strategy. So there was work that was done by CDC in 2020. We've got 2 reports that are in the additional report, in the additional material that was in the, not in the, apologies, it was not in the agenda, but it was additional material. Yeah, so there's 2 reports that are there that are quite detailed in terms of the impacts of climate change on the district and also on council's infrastructure. There was a regional risk assessment that was driven by Otago Regional Council, 2021, and that also was an input to the climate change strategy. So of late, we now have access to the national risk assessment, which was done this year. It was released only last month. And all these risk assessments, they follow what is called the National Climate Change Risk Assessment Framework. And that allows identification, rating of risks, and categorizing them into different domains. And they provide scenario-based projections in terms of what the impacts will be based on different emission scenarios. So just to simplify how you can visualize the risk. So generally, through a climate lens, the risk is a function of exposure and vulnerability. So exposure is the presence of people, assets, or infrastructure in the path of a hazard. So this might be flooding or drought or any hazard that may result from climate change. And vulnerability is how sensitive or how susceptible that asset or that group of people are to that hazard. So you can actually see from here that there's a lot of local knowledge that is required to then understand what level of vulnerability, what level of exposure is there. And it also tells you that you can manage either one or 2 of those factors. So you can manage your vulnerability or exposure, or both of them, as a way of managing that risk. So just as an example, there are places, not here in Twitter, but there are certain places where people are talking about managed retreat. So that's really managing exposure. You're removing people from the path of the hazard, and that reduces the exposure. So that just gives you a picture of how the risk is visualized. So our climate change strategy also contains these 3 principles here. So these are the guiding principles that guide in terms of planning actions and decision making. So key is to ensure safety and plan ahead of time, and also ensure sustainable land use. So there's a bit more detail about each item in the actual climate change strategy itself. We also have an action plan that is in the climate change strategy, and the actions are categorized into 5 broad categories, and they also have priorities. So they've got medium, low, and high priority. So that also assists those who will be actioning those actions to know what to go for first. Key partners are also identified that we will be working with to execute those actions. So ORC is a key partner because we work a lot with other regional councils, and we also work with other councils in the region, and we also work with ORC to leverage the work that they've done all the resources that they have. There is a few things that I will speak about in the actions going forward around the action plan, in terms of how we can enrich that action plan to make it more effective. So if you can just go. So the current activities that we're doing now are broadly following to these two areas. So we've got emissions where we're actually measuring emissions at district level, community level, and then at organizational level. So at district level, this is the emissions that the whole district is producing through the different activities that are happening: economic, residential, transportation, and so on. This information is available on Infometrics, so we do not need to necessarily measure it ourselves. I've put in a snapshot from the Infometrics website where you can actually see and drill down all the way to local areas, so you can see where the different levels of emissions from the different areas of the district. The organizational emissions are what we actually produce in the course of us providing our services or doing our work here as a district council. And we are now going to be producing our first organization emissions report for this current financial year. We've completed the process of defining the boundaries of what we're going to be reporting in terms of what activities are going to be reported and emissions from which asset groups or which areas of council are going to be reported. So at the end of this financial year, we'll then produce a report that will provide what our emissions have been, and that will provide a baseline as well for us to compare going forward. So what this will do is also give us information that we can bring back and set targets based on that, because we now have good information, accurate information of what we're actually doing. Then we can set targets for ourselves for the subsequent years. So in terms of infrastructure projects, there's a number of projects that are happening now. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the work that's being done is really has the effect of increasing climate resilience for the district. It's just important that we identify that work and we report it as such. The other thing is we also need to make sure that when that work is being done, or when we develop the work program, we actually align that work program with what is in the action plan in the climate change strategy. So that's that bit of work that we're going to do, as you will see in the subsequent slides. But there are some projects that are happening now that will actually have the effect of increasing climate change resilience for the district. The next thing that we're doing now is when we're doing the activity management plans, we're actually aligning that work program between the activity management plans with the actions in our climate change action plan. This is because we want to have those budgets in the activity management plans, we want them reflected in the climate change strategy. We want the timelines in the activity management plans to be reflected in the climate change strategy as well. We want the ownership of those projects to be reflected in the climate change strategy. So what it does, it gives impetus to those actions in the climate change strategy, because that means we will know that those actions will actually be delivered because they are funded, they've got timelines, and they've got ownership. So we are actually going to be doing a review of a climate change strategy now. While the risk assessments have not necessarily changed in themselves, so the ORC has gone a step ahead to provide further interpretation of the risk assessments. We've had a workshop here with staff where the ORC and the consultants who did that risk assessment have come and assisted staff to interpret the risk assessments in such a way that we can put some local context to it. So we're going to make sure we make use of that latest interpretations of the risk assessments. We're also going to make sure that we align our action areas to the domains that are in the risk assessment framework, so that there's uniformity, as you would have seen in the expectations from the Auditor General's from the Auditor General's except where it says that they must be comparable. So we want to make sure that there's alignment between the domains that we have in our climate change strategy with what's in the national framework. So like I mentioned, we also want to make sure that the budgets are reflected in the climate change actions, the timelines are reflected in the climate change actions, and there's also ownership to those actions. That means that someone will be responsible or someone will be accountable for delivering those actions as well internally. So this is basically where we want to take it to. We're going to be doing this as part of this LTP cycle. So the general outcome that I had intended to have is to have just this brief overview of what the climate change is about, the journey that we've come to get to this point. And if there's any areas that you would want us to investigate or where you would want us to develop some actions to be done, I'll be able to take that on board. Maybe to take some questions or comments.
Cosmos, will it sort of come out like a document like the Melbourne 2060 strategy? A lot of that work's already been done for that area.
Apologies, I didn't.
Doesn't even know it better.
There's a document out there now called the Melbourne 2060 strategy.
Yeah.
It's got all the flooding, plains, the whole shoot match.
Yes.
Pretty much what you're talking about, but you're doing it for the whole area.
Yeah.
Through you, Your Worship, the original work underpinning the strategy was done by Mike Goldsmith, and he worked that information has been included into the current strategy.
But just to clarify, that probably doesn't look at how that might get worse over time. So that would be part of climate change work. Looking at whether that's going to be sufficient in 80 years. Wasn't looking that far out.
Cosmos, the Auditor General's expectations, what are their expectations from us as the council moving forward now that you've done all this work? You ask us that, like, to what level of further investigations or actions. I think it'd be a fair enough assumption that the councillors sitting around the table actually don't know what we mean to do, because what are the Auditor General, what does he want? Like, what is the most we have to do?
Okay. So I've put in, thank you, Your Worship. I've put in an excerpt from a summary of what the expectations are. And you'll find that if you look at the way we've approached this climate change strategy, some of those actions that they're expecting us to do, we've already done them. So the rigorous assessments that they've asked us to do, we've actually done quite a lot of assessments in terms of the risks. So that's why we've had to put an additional set of material on the side, because it's just too much for this pack. The additional work that has been mentioned about the Newton projections and so on. So we do have robust information to make decisions going forward. It's important that we then make use of that information, for example, to then do some of the subsequent actions that the Auditor General has mentioned here, in terms of tracking our actions, making sure that we report clearly on them, making sure that our actions are comparable, transparent, and so on. So the excerpt here really does summarize what the expectations are. And we do have, like I said, we do have robust information. We do have an action plan. We've got improvements that we can do to the action plan to make that action plan compatible with the requirements here, particularly adding timelines, adding budgets to it, so that we can have some accountability with that action plan. But we are well on our way to meeting these expectations.
Possibly a question for Jules then, like Jules, with the RMA reforms and the current reforms that government are proposing, where does all this sit in there? Like, the question I'm asking really is, what level of investment do we get staff to engage in this before it ends up where?
Well, I'll probably hand to Donna. She's probably got a bit more familiar with some of the requirements.
Thanks, Jill. So, through your worship. So, for example, currently NZTA, as part of their broader outcomes, we're required with any roading projects. Within those broader outcomes, one of them is environmental aspects. So that's quite a broad brush. However, in Australia currently, sustainability reporting is now mandatory. So we can only make the assumption that it will be coming to New Zealand at some stage in a mandatory level. Currently, it's not mandatory, but CANS has actually created, we've got international financial reporting standards associated with sustainability, 2 reports in particular, one of which is entirely on climate change.
Right.
It probably doesn't specifically relate to the RMA through
Yeah.
the worship. It's probably more around those other reporting requirements and what the public's expecting to see and those sorts of things.
Yes, so just to support that, so as an example, the level of the sustainability reporting for the overarching report in Australia currently is you have to provide your greenhouse gas emissions from your direct usage. So for us, that would be council, what we directly do. The second layer is our utilities that are provided to us. So the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the utilities, that's your power and so forth. And then the third one, which is quite broad, is indirect greenhouse gas emissions. So that in Australia potentially covers all your contractors, consultants, any organisation that works directly with their councils.
Councillor Cotton.
Well, a couple of things. Firstly, does civil defence response come into the plan? Well, we're getting flooding in some of our areas. Like, for example, in Orange, we've got a generator. If there's a breakdown there at the service centre, is that part of that thinking? How does that work?
Yeah, it is. So, like I mentioned, if you look at the risk, if you look at the risk definition that I put up as that formula,
yes,
it's the sensitivity and the high and the exposure. So, the vulnerabilities. So, civil defence does play a part in reducing the vulnerability of people and infrastructure. So it's that part there with civil defence does play a part to reducing the overall risk.
So is it prudent for us to maybe like through our community boards or other community groups, I know some are doing some stuff, is it prudent to assist them in that sort of thing? I know in Lawrence we're trying, there's something come across the community board table yesterday where the local staff, and there's about half a dozen, were talking about coming to council about when we have an event like the wind event, they would set up as a communication centre in the service centre and be a mini area like this, which does make a lot of sense because, as you all know, we did something similar through Simpson Park and it became a welfare centre, but we had communications there. And it didn't work too well because there was a bit of 2 things going on in the same room. So maybe that's something we should be doing. I don't know. And the other thing too is, as part of our risk assessment, is that offsetting what we're doing, not only by improving our behaviours, but also by doing things like buying carbon credits, etc.
Are you selling?
Yep. Sure are.
Yeah. So there's a large if you look at the work that is being put in the action plan, it's quite broad. I think one of the actions that we have to do is to make it more granular. So it does speak to some of the actions that are being done even at community level. And one of the main aims of having this strategy in place is to make sure that it's not disjointed how people are responding to climate change in different organizations or in different places.
Yeah.
So that part of aligning everyone to make sure that we all are aware of who's doing what and where and how everyone can assist each other. I think that's a key improvement that needs to be done in the review. Yeah, and in terms of the risk assessment, I think the framework is quite comprehensive in terms of what it considers. But the work that's being done now at the regional level is to provide community with information that is easy to interpret. So it's not too technical.
Yeah.
That is simple and graphic. there's a project that is underway. I can't really tell when it's going to be complete, but sometime this year they'll be completing that project, and that information will be publicly available. And you can see on the spatial map where the hazards are, what's being done about it, so on. So there's a comprehensive set of actions that needs to be done to get to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Would not seeing the action plan actually help guide us to tell us what direction you to go in?
The action plan is actually in the climate change strategy itself.
Right.
It consists
On
of,
what page?
Let me just check for you. Go to page 78 of your agenda.
78.
Yeah. So it goes all the way to page 83. Those are the planned actions.
So Cosmos, in our planning and building side, where climate change sometimes, and you see, especially like some of your bigger cities, where hillsides are coming down and that type of thing. So we do have quite a strict thing on where we build and how high or all that sort of thing, or does that not come into play with us?
So there's there's been some work that's been done on the impact of climate change on the built environment with the include the district council. It's part of the additional. So there's a report that's been done, and that report identifies risks in certain areas of the district in terms of impact on the built environment. So houses and commercial buildings and so on. So it's quite detailed in terms of what are the actual risks, and again, one of the things that we have to do now with this review is to ensure that consideration of that work that has been done is made when people are doing the activity management planning. And also, if the actions are not included here, you might need to include additional actions or break them up in such a way that they can actually be interpreted as to meeting that requirement that you've just made.
Well, I see out of your plan, the action plan, you've actually got 5 high priorities. So would they not be the direction that you'd go in and not focus too much on the medium unless it really overlapped, and then you've got other?
Yeah.
So if you're after direction from council, would that not be the direction that council would?
Yeah, because this action plan, this strategy was adopted by council. This is really what the direction has been. But we are open to additional areas to investigate, additional areas to action. So we really do have a general, like I said, this action plan really speaks about how to review and how to report on the strategy. But if there's additional direction in terms of further investigations or other areas of interest that you may want us to look at, we're open to that.
Cosmos, on those priorities, I've asked this question a couple of times here before on action point number 2. Why are we still reporting in carbon dioxide equivalents and haven't split when we've got agriculture is our biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions? But it's 3 different gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous dioxide, and we don't have to. They're all treated differently.
Through your chair, that isn't how it works, because to equate with how it's calculated, it's basically so it's stock standard across all of them, just to make it easier to understand when it comes to the different gases. Obviously, they all have different lifespans and can often interact with the atmosphere differently. However, for reporting purposes, everything is done in carbon dioxide equivalents. Just for that purpose.
I understand that, but I have.
That's just how it is. That's how the Climate Change Commission has done. So that's the current policy.
And yet they have policies for different gases, but don't report it. Yeah.
I think, to prove my knowledge based on my understanding of it, it is literally just so that they can easily understand and convert everything, because that way you can see everything consistently, because everything has different lifespans, but if you have it on a level playing field, it makes it easier when you're working that sort of stuff out.
Yeah, but I'm just coming from the point of view that when we see this here, agriculture has 81% of the emissions on a carbon dioxide equivalent, but yet in the aim ultimately probably is net zero doesn't include agriculture having to get to zero yet. No, it won't. It won't, because they're different gases. Different impacts. Carbon dioxide will be. Anyway, this is the whole other. We're here. We could, stop right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, any questions for Cosmos?
Yeah, sure. Through you. Can you tell me, so the group in Wellington you were talking about, I can't remember their name now, to be honest, but can you tell me what RCP or what representative concentration pathway value are they using when they're telling us we need to adapt to climate change?
So there's two reports that have two different scenarios, isn't it? There's one, the Otago Regional Council have used it.
So to my knowledge, if you're talking, are you talking about the ORC's one, or are you talking about?
The IPCCs, they have a value which the government and our Climate Change Commission are using for our climate change pathway stuff.
To my knowledge, most of the work previously done has been RCP scenario 8.5. However, I am not entirely sure, but I think a lot of recent work has been incorporating SSPs, which are shared socio-economic pathways, which have come about from the IPC's work of being developed post RCPs. The SSPs can be easily related to the RCP scenarios. However, they just are a lot more comprehensive in their understanding and how they calculate different things.
Okay, so in the latest report, which is AR7, the ICC panel state that the calculations show the effects of climate change around RCP or SSP 8.5 are actually implausible.
Yes, that would be correct, yeah.
So I presume there'll be some sort of correction coming from the Climate Change Commission at some point, because some of their scenarios that are the one we had here for the ORC with the big flooding event, some of those are going to change, I would
Up
presume.
until recently, most councils and government organisations used 8.5 to calculate their risk assessments just because it was worst case scenario. So even though I don't entirely understand why they did that, but that's the business as usual. There has been no sort of changes. We don't decrease our emissions. We actually continue to go up. And why I don't know, but a lot of councils and stuff have just done that over time. Obviously, with the IPCC's recommendation, things will change. However, the recent report, which Cosmos mentioned, of the 2026 Climate Change Commission's New Zealand-wide national risk assessment did still use RCP 8.5. So there might be changes there. However, I'm not sure because that has only been released as of the beginning of last month.
Thank you. And I have one further question. Would anyone be able to tell me what the Otago data mean sea level rise has been in the last 50 years? Because I see here they're telling me by 2100 we're going to be a metre under the sea or something. So can anyone tell me what it's been in the last 50 years? Because it is relevant, I'm sorry. All this sort of stuff is relevant. Because there's been
1.7 mil per year.
There's been scientific work done recently that proves basically that sea level rise in the last, basically since the Industrial Revolution has been minuscule. So, I mean, these are all things that are relevant when Jock's asking, what should we be doing, spending our money on a council around this stuff. So, and you can probably gather by now that I'm not a believer in human induce climate change, and that's because most of the scientific evidence proves that there is none. So, yeah, I will look forward to the Climate Change Commission making a few changes to what they're directing councils to do.
We may need to invest in some snorkels. Cosmos, for me, going through your action plan here and just going off my very short career in this new role, I would go to pages 82 and 83. I'll start on 83 and work back to 82, but goal 3 here you've got down as medium. Well, after the last recent weather event and climate change is coming, would that not be a top priority? I'd put that right at the very lead. The same on 6.4 on page 82. You've got goal 2. It's as a high priority, but I would put that ahead of your goal 1. Because that there, after the recent weather event, is another shining light that shone through. And it also tells me the stuff you're identifying here, that there doesn't seem to be a lot of collaboration between emergency management and some of these findings. And it sort of resonates with me too, with my latest little murmur with the DIA about building our resilience through our communities here. There's a lot of it all intertwined, a lot of these findings here. So when you burrow into it, there's some really good findings. For me, that's what I would be proposing as a direction, is to lift those ones there to the top.
I'm assuming, Cosmos, that the goals aren't in its priority order.
Yeah, so the goals in themselves, numbering of the goals is not a signal.
Right.
Of
So
priority.
if we were to weight them, maybe that was a better question to ask. And if we were to weight these goals, what would we as councillors prefer as top priority? That would be the direction I would be pushing for.
So I still thank you, Worship, for that input, because that will guide us in terms of when we do come up with the refined action plan, we can then bring that action plan before you and ask you to
weight them. Yeah,
weight them.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good, I reckon.
Cosmos. There's exactly as your worship says. There's a lot to take in here, and you're looking for direction. It almost appears that we need to give you some direction to come back with some simpler options on the actions. Yeah, we've got several pages, and many of them are all important.
Yeah, so effectively, you've already identified your directions. So I'd come back and ask us to, it won't take much, to prioritise what you've identified.
You tell us too what you think we should be focusing on, and then let us agree or not.
Is there something we're missing?
Okay.
Probably not.
What?
There is missing it.
Any more questions?
Just on that, Cosmos, too, with that EMO, the emergency management, the lifeline, all that's been done 5-8 years ago at the group level of emergency management. The lifelines, they've had a lifeline coordinator, spend strategies. A lot of that's there, but it's just not getting passed around. There's a lot of work and a lot of money being. They actually had a lifeline coordinator employed full time for over 2 years. So they've got all that stuff. We need to drag it out. A lot of that stuff's all done.
Yeah, I do concur with you, and like I said, there's a large body of work that has been done. It's an issue of us just reviewing it, making sure we are trying it definitely.
Done. Bit of hard work in front of you there, mate. You've done well. Your team, good on you. So is that a bit of a direction for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Happy with that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We don't.
Oh, right, that's
Keep going.
Right, here we go. Welcome, Natasha.
2 metres down.
Quiet, please, councillors. Just when you're ready, councillors.
Yeah. Yep.
Session number 4. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Your Worship and councillors, I'm along with Peter today for the last session that you've been holding on dearly for all day. We're going to step you through the communications and engagement overview and steps for the long-term plan. So I will step you through pretty quickly through the overview, the purposes, and then I'll hand over to Peter, who will drill down more into the stakeholders in the finer detail, and then hopefully we will have space there for you to give us good feedback and direction. So I'll just start with the purpose and outcomes of what we would hope that we can achieve today with you, is that we would like the workshop or from you to set some clear and transparent, inclusive, timely communication goals for our residents, ratepayers and stakeholders that you will identify later on. We would like to ensure that we select the effective approach to reach residents, businesses and community groups and our early stakeholders. And we would like to ensure that we've got the decision-making and consultation framework correct to a standard that you feel comfortable with. So I'll step through now on the next slide, which is just the overview, or the general principles and objectives, obviously. So our overview is that we want to keep endorsing that Clutha District is a great place to live, work and play. That as a council, we want to continue promoting growth and opportunities in the district. And we want to ensure that the engagement strategy and the communication around it really supports the focus on long-term relationships with the different stakeholders. And we really want to bring all our communities along so they have an opportunity to have a voice as we shape our future. I think it's really important to note our commitment that we will respect different points of view, because everyone in a community has different needs and wants, that we want to celebrate our local voices, cultures and stories, because there's some amazing people and groups that live here. And we want to ensure the channels that we use are fit for purpose. So just going to the next slide, we also have to, as part of the standards for engagement, follow legislation under the Local Government Act, which we have listed the core ones for you. So I won't go into that too much detail. And then really the core engagement strategies at a very base level is it's a 4-step approach. So we're preparing, which is the awareness of the engagement plan. We begin to engage, and we're looking at the methods that we're going to use, and we're making sure they're fit for the audiences. Then we build in the report time so we can collate feedback and present findings, whether that's coming back to you, the council. And then we need to close the loop so that we have shown transparency of what's come in, and we share that back to the audience or the community as well. So each step should build on the previous one. We go to the next slide. So the key strategies and plans. So there is a lot sitting underneath the long-term plan that's already in place. You have your infrastructure strategies, you have our place community plans, reserve management plans, we have destination strategies, and hot to trot, we just have the climate change, and also the district plan. So these all sit underneath the long-term plan, but the long-term plan is our key focus. So we can roll over to the next one. And the idea or the vision for engagement is when we talk about two-way, we don't just want to put stuff out to the public and it's just from us. We want to be able to ensure that they can come back in and engage with us. So that's just the whole meaning behind two-way. It's really important that we do identify key relationships and nurture them, and Peter will talk through the stakeholders that you've already identified in the later slides. We want to go where our communities are. So I know in the last long-term plan, the mayor did some drop-in community sessions. So that was one tool they used. We want to use a variety of methods. We don't just want to use one to try and reach everyone. We need to try and use a few.
And we want to adjust the techniques so it makes sense. So it's no use, say, for example, we call farmers in for a meeting, but we have it at a time that just doesn't suit them and no one turns up. So it's just simple thinking around that. And then this is where I'll hand over, I'm handing over to Peter to step you through a little bit deeper.
Thank you, Natasha. In thinking about our overall that we've just gone through, those things we need to time, and different aspects of, particularly that last slide, will occur at different times. And in framing this conversation, what we've done is broken down for your consideration 3 major elements which are proposed to occur. The first is communication with residents, consistent with information provision to keep the community informed on the LTP process, and through that bring back feedback that might come back. That's a continuous process through the LTP as that will occur. The second is an early engagement process, but targeted and using a fit-for-purpose model. So we're nimble, we adapt, we don't replace value, we add value. We use processes that we already have, and they're quite substantial when you actually think about what we operate, how we operate. There's a lot of processes that we can leverage from, we'll talk about shortly. And the final thing is formal consultation, which is a prescribed process, which I'll talk about more in detail, but that is early next year. The early engagement we're suggesting from July. The first section I want to talk about is, and Natasha, I'm hoping will join me in some of the commentary here, is communication with residents. That's critical. It's ongoing, as we mentioned before, that first one. And I might ask Natasha if you want to talk to that slide.
Yeah, so I can pop back up, or are you okay if I just sit here? So we have a variety of channels that we are continually using every day. We have social media, so we have Facebook, we do radio campaigns, we do digital advertising, obviously print advertising through the newspapers, include the Leader, Otago Daily Times, which you'd be familiar with. And then a big part of it is, as elected members, you are also gathering information all the time when you are out and about, people coming up to you or at community groups. So you are also getting a lot of feedback coming in for communication. And then we have Merrill-led communication from the year with the form of media releases on news going out. So that's happening all the time. Does that cover that off for you? Yeah, you'd be familiar with that. And then when we talk about consultation, my understanding is for the last long-term plan, Council invested in a tool called Social Point, which is named Clutha Connect, and that's primarily the platform that's used because we wanted to get away from paper-based submissions, having all our collated. So that was an investment that Council made for the last long-term plan, which we would continue to use. And then the other thing with communications with residents, we always need to be mindful of budget allocations, whether we've got sufficient staff resources, and that people are accessible. So we don't want all our communication to be digital. We have people that may not be on the internet or don't have great service, and so we have to make sure we cater for everyone across the board.
Just something to think about is that we call it communication with residents, not engagement with residents. It has to be thought about in conjunction, because we looked at a question. We looked at it specifically, and there's a couple of things. One was we've got engagement, early engagement with a whole range being proposed, and after this you'll see, when you see through it, with a lot of stakeholder groups and things who are themselves, a lot of cases, residents and things like that. So we're going to get, assuming we do it, but that's what we're proposing, a lot of engagement across the district with a whole lot of different, in a lot of different areas. So we're going to get a good range there. Secondly, we do have the annual resident survey that does give us our baseline view of the total resident population in terms of what they're thinking about council and their areas that they're interested in. So we get to see that. But the issue we had for ourselves around engagement with residents was how do you get value-added engagement in the general population, over and above what we're going to be doing in the early engagement process for the stakeholders? Because we're going to have the formal consultation process, but we're building an early engagement process to help steer what we're writing into the LTP. So our problem was, when we were thinking about it, we were struggling to think, which is why it's open to you guys, and that in terms of if you've got better ideas or more, is if you understand that, we've got those stakeholder early engagements, we've got the resident survey, and we're going to have the general consultation, and we're going to inform people along the way. Is there anything else that's going to be actually value added for residents per se, as the general resident population, about engagement that would be of value in writing up our LTP for formal consultation? And that's where we struggled to think. We couldn't see necessarily value-added opportunities for engagement with the general population other than the informing process and the fact that quite a bit of the general population will be covered representationally through those stakeholder groups, right? So that's what we were proposing. So we didn't just say, no, we don't think we should talk to residents. It's just that we were looking at what does it actually mean. But we know we want elected members. Jock, you're wanting to make sure you're involved and hear from people, but how do we make that value added? We're going to hear them later when you present an LTP, but how do you make that work if you want to do something more than that with the general population? That's the discussion.
Yeah, but I think we've already had this discussion after the elections, and early engagement is engagement, and we know that the engagement, it's like I look at the comments in here, respect different points of view. Well, we do respect everybody's points of view, but whether we listen to them or not is another thing, because we know we get a lot of rubbish chucked at us. So I ain't going to stop listening to anyone that's talking crap. I respect them for having a view, but it doesn't mean to say I'm going to listen to them. So, I believe a lot of this all starts with us to drive a bit of leadership. I've been going on about this since the elections, about having a social presence out there, like get people talking. Like we put our hands up to lead, so let's lead. I think you all know my feelings on the matter. I brought paper to the council for us to discuss, and it's still sitting in the drawer. No one talks about it. So there's a really good opportunity to voice your opinions and give the team some guidance. Get into it. Right up here.
Well, building on that.
No, unless you give us something different, we'll carry on with what we were proposing. But that's fine.
Well, and to that, I found those drop-in sessions a complete waste of time, because all it did was like giving people oxygen to turn up and talk to us like we were a piece of crap. So I don't see the drop-in sessions as effective at all. So we've got to try and find something new.
So
Drop-in sessions, I think what you're actually going to find when people open their next year's rates bill, the first quarter, and they realise, our townships realise they've gone up 30%.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have a lot of engagement. I think you're going to find that if you go and explain it in the drop-in session, that's your first contact there. And they'll actually be. I've got no problems. I've got no problems with a drop-in session. I've had 6 very successful drop-in sessions.
How many did you attend?
The ones of importance.
No, the last round.
Oh,
the ones in the last round. How many did you attend? I attended everyone in the district.
Yeah.
How many did you attend?
2.
Yeah. Right. I rest my case.
But that's your opinion.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
whether you listen to it or not, it's your choice. Or just gave it to you.
In a nutshell.
Drop-in sessions are good.
But often it's the impromptu ones, like I've been out a couple of times this week and people are talking, and so you give them a bit of time.
Yeah.
And